All right, that's the 1 minute warning. And Terry or Jenny, could you hit the got it button on my finger? Cool, thank you. Good timing, Bob. All righty. So we'll start off the meeting today by recognizing that we're conducting our business primarily on the territories of the Hoopeches and Mississauga First Nations. That's where the office is located. However, a lot of us are coming to you live online from Yukchonalt and or Coast Salish territories, including the Lekwungen speaking peoples. With that in mind, we can move into the idea here that we're conducting our meeting in a hybrid format, which means that you can watch this meeting online. It is a Zoom call, but it is also broadcast live on YouTube, either through a YouTube channel or embedded directly in our website. That being said, we don't monitor the chat on either Zoom or YouTube. So getting questions into the board for question period can be done through responses at acrd.bc.ca. And that would be the place where we check. With that, I see that we have people here at the board today, as well as people online. I won't list off the people online. I think folks watching can just read the names. However, here today we have myself, we have the Vice Chair Haggard, we have Penny Cote, Director from Sprout Lake. I was going to call you President Cote again. It might confuse people. As well as Mike Sparrow from Cherry Creek. And we have Dr. Siga from Long Beach, as well as Dr. Roth from Beaver Creek. Staff here today, we have Daniel Cyan as our CAO, as well as Wendy, our corporate officer, and then all of our senior directors in the side there. Okay, so we have a bit of an agenda in front of us today. However, we have two things to add. I believe, Director Boyko, you had an item you wanted to add to 12A. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose, request the board to consider a late item under Section 12 of the procedures bylaw respecting the recording of directors' votes at the board table. Currently, basically for late business, that the ACRD Board of Directors instructs staff to investigate and report back on the board and options and procedures for amending bylaw A 1075 Regional District of Alberni Claycroft Procedures Bylaw respecting the recording directors' votes at the board table. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We'll add that to 12A. And the only other change that I'd like to see is perhaps trading the delegations and moving our MLA up front, because I think Ms. Lee is presenting our audit. And while I'm sure our MLA Osborne would find our audit extremely interesting, she may have other things to get to. With that, are there any other items to add to the agenda or modifications to be made? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please? Thank you, Director Roth, seconded by Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us into item 3, declarations. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest or parent conflicts of interest, as well as gifts exceeding $250 in value? And once, Director Haggard, go ahead.
I'm not sure if this would be a conflict, but I live on the same road as one of the zoning bylaws that would be coming forth today in Cherry Creek. So would my presence create some kind of a conflict, or would you prefer that I leave the room?
I think it depends on whether or not you're within that certain radius. Mike, can I put you on the spot?
Sorry, I'm not familiar how close Director Haggard is to one of the applications. Certainly, it's not some 3 lots down?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it's not something that you vote on, but it might be good practice to just excuse yourself. Yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Haggard. And it's good to have that conversation, and it avoids the appearance of conflict at least, and that's important. Okay, with that, do we have any other declarations? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item is the adoption of minutes. 4A is the Board of Directors meeting minutes for March 22nd, 2023. Move adoption, Director Cote, seconded by Director Roth. Does anyone have any errors, omissions, additions, deletions, etc.? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next up is item B, the committee of the whole meeting dated March 22nd, 2023. Moved by Director Roth, seconded by Director Haggard. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Next up is petitions, delegations, and presentations. So I would remind everyone that we switched the folks. So thank you for being patient, Ms. Lee. But first up, we have our MLA, Josie Osborne, who's in attendance with an overview. Thank you and welcome.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow, let's
exactly.
see. I know what I'm doing. Start on my timer. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'll start off too just by acknowledging my gratitude for being here on the territories of the Hupatchisitt and Shuswap peoples. It's good to be here. Thank you for sharing a meal with me over lunch and having a chance to connect informally. My purpose of coming today is to introduce you to my constituency assistant, Andrea McDonald, who's here with me, and to talk a little bit about the role of the MLA and the role of the MLA's office. Because as members, elected members yourselves, I think you're very familiar with a lot of the principles, but I want you to understand how we help people and how you can help us help people and how we can help you. Lots of helping going on. So MLAs have three distinctive roles that I'm going to touch on briefly, and then I'm going to talk about some specific examples of how my office works to help folks. So first of all, we have a representative role, we have a legislative role, and I'm a member of an elected party caucus as well. So as a representative role, something you're very familiar with as local government elected officials, we are here to serve the people in our constituencies. I voice concerns on behalf of constituents, represent their perspectives and viewpoints in the legislature, not very different, I think, than local government. As elected representatives, you do the same. We also assist in problem solving. So we have constituency assistants like Andrea to help do some of this work. And it's a little bit different than local government because as local officials, I think you liaise directly with your one employee, Daniel, who works with the staff at the ACRD to help solve problems. I've got a few people in my office who help me do that and provide that interface between the public service or the bureaucracy, sometimes we like to call it. And with about 60,000 people in my riding, we definitely need the help of our assistants. The second role is the legislative role. Again, something that I think you're all really familiar with. It's something is around understanding the existing laws or bylaws in your case, planning new laws and new policies, debating these at the table like this, or in my case, in the legislature, and then supporting or opposing those laws and policies. All MLAs do this in the legislature, but obviously those MLAs in the governing party have a little bit more direct impact and influence over legislation and policy making. As a minister of the Crown, as a member of the cabinet, I also spend a lot of my time overseeing the operations of the ministry that I'm responsible for, and have to be prepared to answer questions from the opposition during question period, during estimates, which is debates around the budget and all of the things that my ministry is responsible for. And then as a member of an elected caucus, this is the partisan role. So this is where I think it really differs a little bit from local government, especially outside Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, especially, where my responsibility as a member of a political party's caucus is to help support the work of that caucus, determine the direction of it, communicate out the political party that I belong to, the values of that party, and work with our members to annually update our policies and interests. I'll talk a little bit about the office now, and I want to be really clear that the MLA's office is a non-partisan office. We are here to serve people regardless of who they voted for, whether they voted, whether they're old enough to vote. We're here to serve all people. So we help to connect people with community supports and programs like provincially run supports. The residential tenancy branch is a good example, or provincially affiliated organizations like TRAC, the Tenant Resource and Advisory Center. We connect people with local advocates like those who work through the Friendship Center or the Canadian Mental Health Association. And we don't just help individuals, we help businesses and nonprofit organizations as well. So connecting them with potential funding sources, like right now the BC Manufacturing Jobs Fund is available. And so we're working with a few local businesses here to make sure that they have the information they need to be connected with funding programs like that, or community gaming grants, which funds a lot of nonprofits in the area. Second area that we work in is resolving issues with provincial ministries or agencies, and we help people navigate the government bureaucracy. So some very common ones are ICBC, BC Hydro, MSP premiums people sometimes have issues with, persons with disability or income assistance issues. We also deal with rental programs and supports like that. We provide a lot of feedback that we get to our office to the relevant ministry. And the one that we work with the most is the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So anything from a pothole to a street sign that's missing on a provincial road, we take that feedback and we give it directly to the ministry, and they've been incredibly great to work with. We also provide letters of support for grant applications. So as an example, we provided a letter of support for the ACRD's successful grant application to the Active Transportation Program, and the $500,000 that was came for the Traverse Trail out on the West Coast. We don't do it just for local governments, we do it for businesses and for nonprofit organizations that are applying for programs as well. We provide information to people on government policies and legislation. So we get a lot of inquiries, for example, in the office from individuals who want to know things about the COVID-19 policies in place. They want to know about old growth forests and forest policy. BC ferries is a really hot topic in this writing from Hornby and Denman Island side. People have questions about various pieces of legislation that are up in the House, and they want more information on it. We also, another example is some detailed information we recently provided to the city of Port Alberni around prevention of youth gangs and youth violence issues. So we're able to do all kinds of research through the legislature, the legislative library, and then bring that. We help connect people to other communities. So providing examples of other communities that have programs that the ACRD or Port Alberni, for example, might benefit from is something that we love doing. We also do our best to answer questions and concerns that people have about bigger issues like the cost of living, or providing information on the government supports that can help reduce people's cost of living. And then finally, we do a lot of communication and outreach. So we attend events, I speak at events, we write congratulatory letters for folks that are turning 100 years old and really significant anniversaries and things like that. And families often really appreciate that service as well. People find us by email, they phone us, those are most common. I do take meetings, of course. They're all done by appointment. So you can't just walk into the office, but you can phone or email ahead and people can make appointments. And often my CAs will take a meeting first and get to know what the issue is before I'm able to meet with people. We get a lot of form letters, and we don't deal with form letters on an individual basis, but we do deal with letters and inquiries that come directly in. We only provide the services to constituents. So when somebody states that they're from maybe Vancouver, then we have an auto reply that makes it really clear that we just can't do that. So there's just too many people already that we want to be able to help, and we can't add to that. The last thing I want to touch on before I hand it over to Andrea to talk really briefly about the role of the CA is just around more the political side and the advocacy work and the work that I do with you as a local government. And first of all, I want to say thank you to you for the relationship that I have with the regional district, with the staff, with your chair and your vice chair. This is absolutely critical for me to be successful in my work. And I think for our collective success to represent our constituents' interests. And I really appreciate the local knowledge and the insight that I get every time I talk to you. It helps me understand people's interests, but it also helps me advocate for them. And in that vein, some of the services that I also provide, and I'm really proud to be able to do this, is helping to connect you as a local government to the right ministry, to get meetings with the right ministers, to provide the advice on how to approach certain issues with the province, and how to work with the bureaucracy and not against it, so to speak, and that kind of navigating pathway for political interest that you have, that you're representing. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrea, and she's got 1 minute and 40 seconds to talk about the role of the CA. Oh, you know what? You can do that. Yeah.
So I'll be quick because I don't have much time. So one of the things I'll just add on that our office can do is grant switches. So if there's any programs that you want to bring forward to your community if you're able to send that information to our way, we're able to do searches on any grants that may be through the provincial government or private businesses as well. So I'll just quickly talk about the role of a constituency assistant or CA. So we deal with assistance and advocacy for our constituents, provide them information. We support the work of the MLA. We do outreach and liaison with our community partners, which includes our local government and elected officials. We manage the day-to-day operations of our constituency office. And then also we're just the eyes and the ears of the MLA kind of on the ground, as they're often in Victoria. So I always try and say that know when you're talking to myself or my colleague Britt, you are talking to the MLA. So I think that's all. Got it.
All right. So that's it. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you might have, but hope that was useful and that you have a bit of a better idea of what we do.
Great, thank you. You're right on time. So let's open it up for Q&A. Director Haggard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I just want to thank you and Andrea so much for sending all that information on youth in the community. And I'll be picking through it all next week. There's like 2 huge long emails from both of you. And then hopefully when I come back from holidays, we'll start working on a youth strategy for our community. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the work that you did for me.
All right, any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Director Sia.
I'd just like to acknowledge all the hard work that you do, and I really greatly appreciate the support and completing the trail on this.
Thanks very much for that. Yeah, it's I think that the kind of collaboration that we get to show and me having sat around the table here and understanding about how the ACRD works has been a real benefit. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Director.
Director Cote.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Josie, for coming home. Miss you at the table here. Always valued your opinion and what you brought to this table, and really happy to see you in the position that you're in now. And we'll be reaching out to you. I know I've been meaning to, very short time periods to actually do the reach out, but maybe we can connect. Hopefully we'll see you at AVICC. And yes, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah, and you will see me at AVICC. And thanks. That's a bit of a segue too, just to say there were specific issues that I could have brought forward today, and I know that I've been talking to Daniel and John about them. But sorry, Chair Jack. And but still, it's a very open door policy, and I think almost everybody here has my cell phone number. Please don't hesitate to use it. But thanks for those kind words, Penny.
All right, before I say my thanks, I think the only thing, and I think you've already implied this, but I think the constituency office doesn't just help local governments or citizens or businesses, First Nations as well. I know that they often talk to Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, but the constituency office helps First Nations quite a bit too. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and love seeing you again. It's always great to have you around. And thank you, Andrea, for your part of it too. And so unless there's any other comments, yeah, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for everything.
Great. Thank you everyone for having me. I hope I'll be back soon.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is the audit finding reports from Ms. Lenore Lee. Welcome and thank you, and please take it away at your leisure.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. My name is Lenora Lee. I'm an audit partner with KPMG. I'm joined with my colleague Cameron this afternoon, and we're coming to you from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people. Very grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on these lands. We'd like to share with you today some highlights from our audit findings report, which is included on page 26 of the board package today. And it ties directly to the financial statements, which are also included in today's package on page 87. I've been the audit partner with the regional district for the last 5 years, and our role is to provide an audit opinion on the financial statements. The auditor's report, as you'll see, is drafted as a clean and unqualified audit opinion. And that indicates that attached to those financial statements, we have not noted any material errors within them, and that they present fairly in accordance with the accounting standards that management is required to follow, which are public sector accounting standards applicable for government organizations. I'll just quickly share my screen here, and hopefully we can follow along on a couple highlights. So the audit findings report is a follow-on document to our audit planning report, which was included in your March board package. Our audit was conducted in accordance with the plan, and there was no modifications that was needed, no hurdles or other changes that were needed as we executed on that work. In terms of the overall status of the audit, we are substantially complete. There are no items that are outstanding other than discussion with the board today and acceptance of the financial statements. At that time, we'll exchange a management representation letter from management with our auditor's report, and that will bring the audit to a close. As a reminder, the materiality applied to the financial statement audit was $500,000. And that's generally based off of the total expenses of the regional district for the 2022 fiscal year. What that means is that when we go to issue our audit report, if there are uncorrected differences greater than 500,000, we would suggest that those be modified or incorporated into the financial statements prior to having an impact on our auditor's report. As I indicated, it is a clean opinion, and as a result, there are no unrecorded audit differences greater than that 500,000 mark. In fact, you'll see in the report that there was only one unadjusted audit difference, and it was just over $25,000, which was primarily a timing issue that an expense related to 2022 was recorded in 2023 instead. Overall, it was a pretty immaterial impact on the overall financial statements, which is why it is in 2023. In terms of other items to note, there are no changes in the accounting standards in 2022. The public sector accounting standards have been applied consistently year over year, and as a result, all the same rules that are incorporated into 2021 were applied in 2022 as well. With each audit findings report, we also confirm our independence, and there were no other services provided to the regional district that would impair our ability to perform an independent audit in accordance with the Canadian audit standards, which are the rules that we need to follow as auditors. In terms of areas of focus, there's a couple here that we'll touch on. The first relates to management override of controls. This is an audit risk that applies to every audit, regardless of size of an organization, industry, nature of operations. This is something that as auditors, we need to conduct across every audit that we perform. And the reason being is that the internal controls of an organization may work and function effectively on a day-to-day basis, but management nonetheless is in a position to be able to record year-end entries or one-time entries that impact the overall financial statements. And that's a risk area for an audit. To address that particular risk, we test specific adjustments that are recorded in and around year end or that we deem to be unexpected or unusual combinations. We also review estimates for significant judgments or indication of management bias and any unusual transactions that were recorded in the financial statements. As a result of those procedures, we had no issues to bring to your attention and no anomalies in this particular area. I'll turn it over to Cameron here just to speak about a couple other areas of focus as it relates to the financial statements.
Thanks, Lenora, and thank you everyone for your time today. So this is looking at page 32 in your package. I will briefly touch on other audit areas of focus. Revenues as a whole compared to the prior year were up approximately $1 million, slightly below budget of $23 million, with the majority of that difference attributed to government transfers. Taxation revenue during the year was $7.91 million. We sampled tax requisitions by agreeing the amount to the budget and cash receipt. In terms of government transfers, revenue recognized during the year was 5.46 million. The main transfers relate to the landfill diversion program, the BC Air Access Program, and gas tax funding. We sampled both conditional and unconditional government transfers. Conditional meaning certain conditions need to be met, such as spend on eligible criteria, in order to recognize that revenue. And until it meets those conditions, it sits as deferred revenue on the statement of financial position. Unconditional meaning that there are no conditions attached and revenue can be recognized immediately. For the samples that we selected, we reviewed contracts and agreements for accuracy and reviewed the accounting treatment to ensure that they were recorded in the right spot as either revenue or deferred revenue. We have no findings to report to you. If you move on to the next page, I will talk through TCA, and the main thing I want to highlight here today is capital additions. So tangible capital additions during the year were 5.6 million. The majority of that spend was on the West Coast Organics processing facility and curbside collection carts, interior building renovations, Long Beach Airport water main upgrades, and Beaver Creek water infrastructure. We tested a sample of additions by agreeing to supporting invoices and payment, and we also reviewed financial statement disclosures. Similar to previous years, we noted a presentation difference that departs from public sector accounting standards, where the assets are disclosed based on service rather than type. Management has chosen this presentation as this presentation is consistent with the budget and allows for comparison to show how management is monitoring its activities. We have no other findings to report to you with respect to TCA. Moving on to the next page, I will touch on landfill liability. So the district has two landfills, the Alberni Valley landfill and the West Coast landfill. The current accounting standard requires a liability to be recorded for closure costs based on current utilization of the landfills. So management has made their best estimate on what this liability is based on a number of assumptions. We have reviewed the methodology to ensure that it is in compliance with public sector accounting standards. We have also performed procedures to validate the inputs used in the calculation, including things such as the usage rate, the discount rate, and the inflation rate. We have no findings to report. However, we note that a new public sector accounting standard, asset retirement obligations, will become effective for fiscal 2023. A key change from the current standard is the requirement to record the entire estimated closure liability in the financial statements rather than just the usage. This will result in a significant uplift in the liability upon transition, and we have been working with management through their implementation and transition progress. If you turn on to the next page, I'll just briefly touch on technology used in our audit. So we use computer-assisted auditing techniques to aid in testing completeness of journal entry populations and to help us identify unexpected account combinations. An example of this might be a credit to revenue where the offsetting entry isn't an expected entry, so it's not a debit to cash or a debit to a receivable position. And using this helps to gain better insight into our audit. We have nothing to report in terms of this, and I'll just briefly move on to the next page. And so this page summarizes any significant changes in accounting policies, estimates, or disclosures. For the fiscal year 2022, there have been no changes. I'm now going to pass it over to Lenora.
Great, thanks, Cameron. Just to wrap up our discussion here, we are required to communicate with the board any significant or material control deficiencies. Those would be areas of risk or exposure where a material error to the financial statements could occur. We have not noted any in the course of our audit work, and so this page provides you with a bit of information as to what would be communicated and no concerns to bring forward to your attention. Those were really the highlights of the report that we wanted to touch on today. A big thank you to management for all of their assistance with the audit. There are a number of questions that we ask as part of the process, many pieces of documentation that we request as well, and we were able to get a very timely response and full and open access to all of the information that we requested, with a very positive and clean outcome for the audit. So many thanks for all of the support and assistance with bringing this process to today's point in time. Happy to address any questions the board may have.
Great. Oh, thank you for stopping sharing. And I just wanted to say welcome to Cameron as well. I neglected to introduce you. Thanks. Do we have any other comments or questions on the audit? I have one, but it's boring and nerdy, so I want to cover something substantial first. I don't see anything. I might have to get right to the nerdishness. Okay. I had a question in regards to your computer assisted auditing techniques. The one in regards to that, are you starting to use AI technologies to aid you in that, or is it just kind of regular programming that you run things through?
Yes, we are starting to use AI as well, in terms of, for example, loading all of the transactions into our software, and using predictive tools to determine where there may be unexpected or unusual transactions to drive our risk and focus in the audit.
Now, as a follow-up, in regards to using AI, do you find that that's helping with the workload? I know that quite a bit of the changes on PSAB are actually leading to more and more work for auditors. Is this helping?
I think it is, and also providing an uplift to audit quality, where traditionally audits are sample-based. We don't look at every transaction during the year. And so AI certainly allows us to review all transactions rather than on a sample basis. We don't take it all the way to source documentation, but again, it helps just to drive our risk management and greater coverage and uplift in quality.
And last question then, if you're having AI sample the entirety of the transactions, then that will probably increase the number of mistakes that are being made. Are you adjusting the way that you report these mistakes because you're sampling the entirety now rather than whatever you go in and look? I just wanted to kind of flag that as something that we need to understand when things are reported as increasing over time, but now you're sampling everything. That will affect the numbers. Is that correct?
Yes, we generally apply the audit misstatement posting threshold to any differences that we encounter. So based on a materiality level of 500,000, anything greater than 25,000 in individual audit difference would be reported. So depending on, if we have a larger volume of errors, if individually they are less than 25,000, that wouldn't necessarily be reported in our findings report, but we would still consider collectively if in sum they add up to an amount greater than 25 or larger, we would be reporting that in the findings report.
That's awesome for me, at least. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and I hope everything goes well. Have a good one.
Great, thank you.
I promise I'm an interesting person. Okay. With that in mind, I think that brings us to correspondence for action. Item 6A, it's an invitation and a donation request for the Day of Mourning ceremony on April 28th. This is the day of mourning for people injured and killed on the work site. So this is being hosted by the steelworkers local here. I've already agreed to go say some words because my father was injured in a logging accident. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I don't know that it needs any actions anymore other than maybe confirmation. Is that correct? We just need to confirm? Yeah.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, since I said I would do it, I'll just move that the board support Director Jack to represent the ACRD at the Day of Mourning ceremony being held on April 28th, 2023.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Director Haggard. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. All right, that brings us to correspondence for information, item 7, A through D, or A through C. Is there anything anyone would like to pull out, or just move the motion to receive all of the items for information? Dr. Haggard?
I'll move that the board of directors receive items A to C for information.
Thank you. Seconded by Dr. Siga. Last chance, any comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to decisions and bylaws. Item A, thank you for being patient, Al. So we have our code of conduct policies. So before we get to that, do you just want to do a quick introduction on this? Wendy?
Yeah, I've prepared a little,
Go ahead, Al.
or do you want staff to start and introduce their report first? I'm good either way.
Yeah, how about you just bring us in now?
All right. Yes, thank you, Chair Jack, and good afternoon to the board and staff. It was good to see Josie Osborne in the room earlier. I sent her a text. I do still have her number in my cell phone just to say hi. I trust you've all had a chance to review the draft code of conduct as presented in your agenda this afternoon. But for the benefit of the folks in the gallery or maybe those watching online, I'm going to do a brief review with the board's permission of how we got here and what the new code encompasses, just so that everybody understands what it is we're on about. The board will be aware that the province rewrote the community charter last year to mandate that all local governments in BC make a decision on reviewing codes of conduct within 6 months of the first meeting after the election in October. Further to that, there was a ministerial order written last June that says any review or any code of conduct that's created has to be done within a context that considered 4 core principles: integrity, accountability, respect, and leadership and collaboration. Staff contacted me shortly after the election to ask if I would facilitate the review. The board will know that this is actually your first code of conduct with the ACRD. You haven't had one prior to this. It's my understanding there was really no need for it. And in a sense, we hope that'll continue. But because of the provincial mandate, we decided to write one and called in some help from me for that. So I set to work on creating the first code, and we had a very robust discussion with the board in early February, where we went over the history of the requirements, looked at best practices, looked at some of the UBCM history, and then set to creating the document that's before you today. That document is a blend of best practices. Parts of it are a cut and paste from the UBCM model code of conduct. Other parts are definitely unique to the ACRD. I tried to base the final product as much as possible on the input that we received at the February session. And I want to thank staff as well for their input and additions to the draft I presented to them a week or so after we had our meeting. The board will be aware this document has already undergone a legal review. There have been some recommended changes based on input from the lawyers. The particulars are spelled out in the staff report that covers this agenda item. I'll briefly run through some of the highlights of the document, again, mostly for the benefit of those who are watching and might not be as familiar with all this as board members are. The policy really seeks to set out a set of behavioral expectations for both board and committee and commission members. Those expectations are primarily around how those people and staff interact with one another. And that's also why only board or committee or commission members and staff have standing to file complaints under this code. We've included and defined the 4 principles I talked about earlier: the integrity, accountability, respect, and leadership and collaboration. Lots of specifics that I'm not going to get into all of them, but the overriding principle really is a respect for process and respect for each other. Respect for the decisions taken by the majority. Respect for your colleagues. If you as a board member disagree with a decision taken by your colleagues, you're allowed to say that, but you're committing to expressing that disagreement without rancor, without calling your board colleagues out for being stupid, for disagreeing with you, that kind of thing. The code also touches on how you express yourself on social media and in the media generally. Again, the fundamental requirement is a respect for process and respect for the rule of the majority. There's a section in the code on conflict of interest. As most of you know, I spent almost 15 years in elected office, and I've seen that the specifics of this are always a sticky subject for elected officials. It even came up at the start of today's meeting. So we've tried to lay down some guidelines on what constitutes a conflict and what does not pose problems. Code also references the one employee policy and the need to respect the role of staff. Some discussion about sticking to the so-called open meeting rule, the idea that decisions, especially those in the context of statutory or public hearings, should not be made by the board or committee members getting together in a coffee shop before the meeting to determine how they're going to vote. It's really about transparency for the public and the notion that decisions have to be made at the board and committee meetings rather than what used to be called the political back rooms. One of the things that's unique about your code, I haven't seen this addressed in any other code of the province, is section 13, the so-called mandatory leave of absence. It covers the hypothetical situation where a board member is charged with a criminal code offense or an offense under the Controlled Substances Act And it sets out the process for what will happen in a case like that. I want to give credit to Chair Jack and your CAO. They brought this issue up in our very first preliminary planning meeting for this process and said they wanted it addressed in the code. Of course, this goes to a history in BC where generally there haven't been a lot of tools to deal with this situation. In the past, if an elected official was charged with a crime, they were technically free to continue in their office until the courts had dealt with the situation, and that could sometimes take months or even longer. And that creates a lot of public cynicism and distrust. So now it's written into your code. If there's a charge, the person has to back away from the governance table and any other work they do in their role as an elected official until that charge is resolved. On the presumption that they're innocent until proven guilty, it will be a mandatory leave with pay. Interestingly, when the chair and the CAO first brought this up back in January, none of us, including me, were aware that the province had just rewritten the community charter to address this exact situation. For those who want to look it up, it's Part 5, Division 6.1. The provisions in your code pretty much mirror the language in the charter. And actually, here's the thing. There's a few sections in your code that could be seen as a bit redundant in that they address issues that are covered in provincial legislation. But we deliberately put them into this document in the interest of transparency. This is a public-facing document in the sense that it's a place your community can come to assess what the behavioral expectations are for their elected officials. And while those expectations on conflict of interest, for example, or open meetings or a host of other issues are covered in legislation, this document puts as much of that as possible into one place for easy reference, so the community can have confidence that you'll all hold yourself to the highest possible standards. One of the concerns about these codes of conduct is they can be politicized or weaponized to make somebody look bad. The idea that complaints can be motivated by politics, the code addresses that by saying any complaint which is found by a third-party investigator to have been filed frivolously or maliciously, that complaint itself would constitute a violation of the code. And then there's a whole section on how complaints are handled. As I said at our February meeting, in some sense, this is the most important part of the whole document. And the most important part of this part is something I want to stress to you again today. Complaints and disputes, wherever possible, should be settled informally. The primary reason is cost. If you end up going down the road of hiring that third-party investigator, that can run you $25,000 or more. I've seen it go a lot higher than that in some instances. Really, the whole code is about prevention wherever possible. As I said in February, the very fact that you've chosen to have a code acts as a deterrent to bad behavior. And there's one other thing, the notion of penalties. If a complaint is not settled informally and if a third-party investigator finds there's been a breach, there's a whole laundry list of options available to that investigator in terms of recommended sanctions. Everything from a motion of censure to removal from committees, a ban on regional district-sponsored travel, restriction of access to staff. The board chose to make those sanctions mandatory. Whatever the third-party investigator recommends, that's the way it's going to go. Most codes I've helped create say the investigator's recommendations will be subject to board review and approval, but you wanted to forego that discretion by making the recommendations of the investigator binding on all parties, basically to forego any potential political stuff at the table. I do need to note that the legal review added a few words around ensuring procedural fairness, but I believe the intent remains intact in the final draft that's before you. There's one other mandatory penalty that's becoming quite common in these codes of conduct. Section 1612 says, if a third-party investigator finds the code has been breached by an elected official, that violator's pay will be docked. This is a serious penalty, and it's another reason for all parties to work toward an informal resolution of the complaints, as I outlined earlier. But the third-party investigator's recommendations are binding. 1612 in particular takes the politics out of that part of the penalty. If you decide to adopt this policy today, the clause is automatic. The pay cut is not up for debate if a third-party investigator determines there's been a breach. If there are repeat offenses, the pay cuts would be compounded to the point where a chronic offender could potentially be sitting at the board table with no remuneration at all. I know it seems harsh, but some experiences elsewhere around the province have shown that some people almost wear things like a motion of censure or a ban on travel as a badge of honor. I stood up for the people. That's the kind of thing you hear, right? these are the chronic offenders, and I really trust, based on the meeting we had back in February, we don't have any of those folks at this table. But this policy will also apply to future boards, and as such, best practice points to the need to include this clause. And this will require an amendment to your remuneration, expenses, and benefits bylaw, and that's the second recommendation in the staff report that's before you. So that's pretty much my overview. I want to thank you, Board Chair Jack and staff, for your confidence in me by hiring me to do this review. It's been a pleasure working with you all, and I'm open to any questions anybody may have. Chair Jack.
Thank you for that. This is a great presentation. Any comments or questions? Director Haggard, please go ahead, and then Director Cote.
Thank you, Chair Jack. When I was reading this, I was just wondering who would be considered a third-party investigator? Would it be legal counsel or be a consultant such as Al, who's very familiar with the document? Who would that be if we had to actually hire somebody to do it?
Go ahead.
Generally speaking, the third-party investigators that I've seen that are brought in are lawyers with experience in mediation and labor law and these kinds of investigations. It's a highly specialized field, which is one of the reasons it's somewhat expensive. But yeah, they're not, I wouldn't do it. I mean, I help write these codes. I'm not going to enforce them. But yeah, there are people out there. If you Google, I'm not sure what the Google term is, but I mean, I know some names of some of these folks who do the third party.
As a supplemental to that, Hooyat First Nations used an investigation firm. They are lawyers who are involved in not necessarily the employment side of things, but the gender-based equity aspects in the Hooyat experience. So there are definitely very specialized investigators, labor, other technical aspects, and that sort of thing. So we'll have
some depends on the nature of the complaint. If it's a gender-based complaint, you're probably going to go more toward that kind of an investigator. If it's a bullying and harassment complaint, you may go a different direction.
Yes, thank you. Director Cote.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks, Elle, for all of this work. It's code of conduct is something that every community or every board needs to buy into. But I have a couple of questions. I don't see the director from UQLIT today, but there was comments that UQLIT wasn't having buy-in by all their council to sign on. So I'm just wondering how our code of conduct it would relate if we don't all sign on, because each individual director has to sign a document, as I'm understanding, to sign on to the conduct.
There is, at the back end of the code, there is an attestation kind of thing where, I, Director Cote, director for area whatever, I have read the code of conduct and agreed to it. Some local governments have also added it to their oath of office to say, I'm going to, not only will I fulfill all the stuff that the province says I have to do, but I'm going to live by the code of conduct. I have honestly never run into a situation where an individual director says, no, I'm not going to sign on to this code because I don't like it. If the board as a majority of the board votes to accept this as a code of conduct, it is your code of conduct. Again, we at the very beginning of the process, I said, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV. I really don't know what the implications would be if a majority of the board said, yes, we're going to have a code of conduct. And hypothetically, you, Director Cote, said, well, that's nice, but I'm not going to sign on to it. So I can behave whatever way I want. I really don't think that not signing on to the code of conduct would have the consequence of you saying, now I can behave whatever way I want. I don't think that's how it works. I think the signing off on the thing is more a formality to indicate that you personally reflect and agree with the majority decision of the board to adopt, assuming that adoption comes today.
Thank you. Can I continue? Thanks. I'm just wondering, how the validity of having a code of conduct if there is directors that won't sign on, and also does this further go on to having our alternates have to sign on, and committee and commission members having to sign on, and because of the volatility of elections these days, should candidates have to actually sign a code of conduct there's been a lot of discussion on this through UBCM and ABICC executive just talking about their codes of conduct. And UBCM does have a code of conduct that if you want to attend any of their functions, you have to sign the code of conduct, as well as ABICC. We've adopted that as well. I'll wait for an answer. Thanks.
Okay. Daniel, would you want
So as a policy of the organization, you don't specifically have to sign on to that one policy. You are subject to that policy. And so at the end of the day, if the board passes this policy, then all of our commissions, all of our elected officials and people serving in that capacity fall subject to that policy. And whether or not they agree with it doesn't impact whether or not they're impacted by it. So it's no different than a financial policy where you have rules about keeping receipts and whatnot. You may not sign on to that policy, but you're subject to it as an elected official.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think the difference here is because it goes to, and I totally agree with Daniel, that's what I said earlier. Just because you don't sign on to it doesn't mean you can behave whatever way you want. But I think the difference here is that there's a clear signal to the community when you put your John Henry on the dotted line that, yeah, I've read this code and I'm 100% on board and I'm going to behave myself to the best of my ability and live within this code. If somebody chooses not to put their signature on that, that's entirely up to them. But within the sort of present environment, we talked extensively in February about the divisiveness in community. I think within the present political environment, it would not be politically wise to refuse to sign on to a code like this, and there would potentially be political consequences down the line. And I suspect most people around this table are aware of that and would sign on to it. That's why the sheet is there, but your CEO is correct. There's really no requirement to sign on. If the board adopts the policy, it's the policy. So there it is.
I think just as additional to that, I think it's important that we do kind of follow good practices and make a reasonable effort to ensure that everyone who's involved or might be involved with the organization is informed of the code of conduct. And part of that is part of the reason we have the commitment. You need to make sure that we make reasonable efforts to ensure that people who are parts of commissions or committees understand what the policy means and what it doesn't mean as well. Because one thing that we'll need to be careful on is there can be interpretations of the code of conduct that it prescribes the conduct or even the thoughts or speech of individual members of the board or members of committees, and that's not what the intent is. The intent is to create boundaries around the ill and bad faith behavior, as well as ensuring that we enshrine some of the things that are pretty important. So I think that's one thing we need to be clear on, and I think the commitment is part of that because it starts the conversation. Even though it's not required. Any more comments? Dr. Sparrow, please go ahead.
We'll wait to put this in format so we can give it to all of our people that are on committees as part of their nomination packages. So it will be part of that so they know what they're entering into before they come to this board or interact with this board, so they know fully well what's going to happen.
Very good point. That's exactly the kind of direction I'd like to see this go, is that when somebody is first brought into the organization, they're given the terms of reference for whatever it is they're a part of, as well as the code of conduct, as well as whatever their remuneration documents might be if they have that, just to make sure everyone's above board and understands what's required from the get-go. Then they can make an informed decision, right?
Will this also be given out to committees that already have, like the APC committees and all that? Will this be retroactively given to them as new material so they can understand what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as we pass it, it'll be something that'll be handed out likely at the very next meeting of that organ or that committee or commission or whatever. Okay, Dr. Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So a lot of the committees, commissions, those people are volunteers. So I'm just wondering, these remuneration, expenses and benefits really doesn't have any,
You're quite right when it comes to that, Dr. Coche. I think when it comes to commission members and committee members, it's a bit more straightforward. We'll just remove them if that's the case. We might not even need to use the code of conduct, but it is a good guide in regards to how we go about doing it. Because the way that representations are made of the organization, committees provide advice, commissions generally provide advice, and the decisions are represented by the board and board spokespersons, and so on and so forth. So, the common infractions would be likely committee members or commission members speaking out of turn, or raising a ruckus in a way that is not covered by the other things outside of the code of conduct. Go ahead.
so knowing that, then maybe we should have a separate code of conduct for those separate committees and commissions.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily need to, because this will apply to all members of the governance aspect. So I think it does happen that way. I think we're only talking about consequences, and for volunteer positions, it ends up being whether you're a part of it or not. There may be other instances where somebody could just have a conversation with that individual going, hey, this isn't for the code of conduct, we're giving you a chance. And that allows for some discretion depending on the type of infraction it may be. I don't think a separate code of conduct is necessary. Al, go ahead.
I would just add, I'm just sort of reviewing the code again, and where there are specific penalties, for example, or things that only apply to directors, that's kind of specifically mentioned in the code. When a director has been found by a third-party investigator to have breached the policy, 1612, irrespective of any other recommendations, the remuneration to which that director would otherwise be entitled shall be impacted. So that's a director. The same thing applies for the gifts issue earlier on, and some of the conflict of interest things, and also the mandatory leave of absence. If a director is charged with the criminal code or offense under this Controlled Substances Act, that director will have a paid leave of absence. It doesn't talk about committee members. So when I wrote this, it's generally for everybody, but there are specific things that apply only to directors, and the code tries to make that fairly clear.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Dr. Sparrow, go ahead.
So does that directors mean alternate directors, and others sit in the chair on behalf when director's not here? Is that considered a director? Because it doesn't say alternate directors.
You can say yes.
Yeah. The answer is yes. I have two people on the other side of you nodding away. Yeah. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, with that, I'm wondering if we could have a motion to adopt. Director Haggard?
I'd like to move that the Alberni-Quaycott Regional District Board of Directors adopt the ACRD Code of Conduct policy as presented.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Thank you, everyone, it seems. Okay, further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. You didn't vote, Al.
I'm just waiting for the second one, and then I'm going to Zoom and go do something else.
All right. With that, the next motion is the one to direct the staff to commence process amending the remuneration, expense, and benefits bylaw. Do we have a mover for that? Thank you, Director Siga.
I'll second.
Seconded by Director Haggard.
And just for the record, Mr. Chair, I presented as part of my package what that suggested amendment would look like. And when we did the legal review, we did it on the code, but the lawyer specifically didn't look at the bylaw. And I would defer to your CEO in terms of whether that's been done yet or not. Again, it's a fairly standard cut and paste from what some other municipalities and regional districts have done. So I don't foresee any huge problems with it, but I would leave that one to staff to address. And thank you.
Getting some nods from Daniel.
So yeah, there's no issues with the amendment there being presented. The issues that were flagged legally were applied to the main policy itself, and that was really around the due process that's owed. From there, it's really to the discretion of the board. So this is a document that they can amend as presented.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for comments. All of those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the next agenda item. Al, thank you once again, and I hope all goes well. I want to see what weather's like over here.
I appreciated doing this with you folks.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to item B, which is the ACRD's financial statements, the audited financial statements. Terry, did you want to?
Sure. I think the auditors gave a pretty big overview of the financial statements. I just remind the board that it is a consolidated view of our financial operations, which is a bit different than how we see things during budget on a service level. So happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Boyko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Terry, thank you for the consolidated report. When will we be able to see the actual detailed statements to go through it and see a few more things? Are we going to be able to see that before we have to vote on it, or do we have to vote now and wait till later? Thank you.
What in particular are you looking for? This is kind of the detailed statements from a revenue and expense standpoint. It all aligns with what was in the financial plan. If you have questions about the assets or liabilities, I can definitely provide more information at a later date, or we can hold off adopting if there's a larger question. What exactly are you looking for?
Thank you, Terry. I just like to go through it in a bit more detail, but I assume everything's good. I just want to. Well, my question would be, when would the SOFI be released? Because I don't see that kind of level of detail in the financial statement.
Yeah, for sure. So the statement of financial information is a requirement of the province, and it's due by June 30th. So the adopted financial statements will come back with those additional schedules that include like director remuneration, staff remuneration, payables that were over 25,000 to vendors. That report comes out. We usually aim for the first meeting in June, and then this statement becomes part of that larger package. But we need to adopt the statements prior to that time.
Thank you for the clarification, Terry. I got no more questions.
Thanks, Director Cote.
Thank you. On page 103, it's tangible capital assets, and it says fire department. Would that be a combination of all three fire departments?
Yes, it is all of our fire services infrastructure from all three, Beaver Creek, Bamfield, and Sprout Lake fire departments.
Any further comments or questions? Could we have a motion to adopt the audited financial statements? Thank you, Dr. Roth, seconded by Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. Another set of statements. Good. All right, that brings us to the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department vehicle purchase. I think that's Jenny. Or
No, we got Charlie.
is Charlie here? Oh, he is online. Okay, please go ahead, Charlie.
Hi, afternoon. Yeah, just this is Sprout Lake preparing for the purchase of a duty officer's vehicle, and what they're asking for with this request is the ability to be able to act quickly if they come across a good used vehicle that will suit their needs. These used trucks are few and far between, and they want the ability to act on that. This was included in their budget for this year, and that's it. Anyone has any questions?
Thank you. Dr. Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So I would make the motion that the Alberni Quaypot Regional District Board of Directors exempt the purchase of a new or used one-ton truck from the ACRD purchasing policy request for proposal process, and further that the Alberni Quaypot Regional District Board of Directors authorize staff to undertake a request for quotation process for this purchase and delegate authority to the Chief Administration Officer to authorize the purchase provided it's within the $75,000 included in the 2023 budget for the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department Duty Officer Truck.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Haggard. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item D, which is the Interflow Corporation notification of transfer of tenure dispositions. Who speaks to that? Oh, there we go. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this, there was a letter from the Ministry of Forests on our last board agenda, and the board referred the correspondence to staff to look at. Staff have reviewed the transfer of tenure and found that there is one agreement that falls within the ACRD boundaries, and they have reviewed it and have no notable impacts on ACRD public interests are expected. So we don't recommend any objections to this transfer. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I did ask for a map and I did see the map and recognize that there is some land transfer within Sprout Lake electoral area. And I would request that should there be any harvest planning, that the regional district director of the area be invited to participate in seeing what the proposed logging is. For instance, Sprout Lake has a set of values that was established during the creation of the community forest that I have passed along to different logging companies just to bring forward the values of the community. Well, thank you.
Is that something we could just do, or should we add that to a motion?
Typically with our regular check-ins with those like Mosaic and whatnot, we'll have quarterly check-ins, and we do bring that up. We could put it in a motion and share it. That's okay. There's no harm done by putting it in a motion, that's for sure.
Okay, let's add it in then. That's
Okay,
Yeah.
so can you make a motion out of what I said?
So it's if they ever plan to do any harvesting or change the harvest plan.
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, then well, let's just say the chair and the relevant,
Area director.
yeah, chair, vice chair, relevant area director,
Okay, yes,
kind of follows.
great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would you like to move that? All right, thank you. We have a seconder. Thank you, Dr. Siga. Any further comments? Dr. Siga, go ahead.
Just one. I'm not aware. I'm very unfamiliar with the forestry process, as I've mentioned. I am concerned because we have contacts with many organizations that are representing a more holistic view, including the West Coast Aquatic Board and the Copper Biosphere Trust. And I'm not aware of what the consultation process is in terms of those bodies as compared to ACRD.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think there would be benefit when it comes to the forestry practice to actually do what we've done in other areas and have a workshop, and staff can coordinate finding appropriate individuals to talk about the consultation process that is required provincially or imposed by various companies. It might be beneficial. I think it's a larger discussion rather than a one-off, and we can look into see if there's any options for us to bring that knowledge base in if that's beneficial.
Thanks. Director Boyko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I support what Director Cote is putting forward about being notified about future and planned things in the director's area, because in the past, especially in Beaufort, there has been poor management practices with regard to roads and water, and being notified of what's coming up could make sure the landowners that are right next door could also be aware of the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, there could be water considerations there that affect the entire area too. So that's a good point. Okay, the surface water, sorry. Could we have a motion, or it's moved and seconded already, sorry. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried, thanks. All right, that brings us to item E, I believe, which is the Long Beach Airport lease application. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a 3-year short-term lease application for basically a storage of tools, vehicles, equipment, and landscaping supplies at a location at the Long Beach Airport. We took this to the West Coast Committee and the preliminary application was approved. We've worked with the candidate, or applicant, I should say, to find an appropriate spot that's actually close to an old building, so it will provide some security benefit for us as well. We have presented and discussed this lease application with the Squamish First Nation, who do not have concerns, especially because it is a short-term lease. And it being a short-term lease, it will not negatively impact our long-term land use and development plan that is going to be taking place starting later this year. Happy to answer any questions.
Director Siga and then Director Sparrow.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there is any process in place whereby there's like a damage deposit for mitigation should there be damage to the property.
Through the chair, we do not have that within the lease language. Like, we have a very good master lease template that we use, and I'm just trying to recall some of the specifications in there. So we've got quite a section on environment and making sure that there is no damage to the environment. So we have legal clause. We don't have money put down per se. We just charge the lease rate annually and they pay that. But we do have legal recourse if something had happened.
All good? Okay. Director Sparrow, go ahead.
Are there any provisions in here regarding the use of fuel and stockpiling of landscape, things like fertilizers in the same building? Is that being addressed?
So when we ask for their application, we do ask, is there any going to be storage of any hazardous waste or waste materials or fuel or anything like that? And in this application, they have said that that is not their plan. So this is a satellite location to their main one in Tofino, I believe. So I think it really is just stockpiling soil materials, landscape materials like crushed rock and compost and things like that, and some equipment.
Great. Are there any other comments? Director Siga, would you like to move the motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that the ACRD Board of Directors approve entering into a short-term lease agreement with Christopher Simmons of Captured Light Gardening for the use of lot LSL 2023-001 at Long Beach Airport, effective May 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2025, at a rate of $3,775 per year, plus applicable taxes and yearly BC CPI increases.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Roth. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. All righty, that brings us to the West Coast Multi-Use Path Construction Award. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the next good news story in this project. So we did an invitation to tender at the beginning of March and received, I believe, 5 bids for construction services. The lowest conforming bid tender was $1.171 million, which is within our construction budget, which is excellent news considering we've seen over costing projects for quite a while now. So this is really good. The construction schedule, which we didn't put in here, but it is anticipated to begin immediately with construction completion by the fall. So that's great. That should meet our grant timelines. Yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Director Siga and then Dr. Cote.
Through the chair, thank you. I'm excited that this piece gets finished. It was, to me, a real safety issue and high risk area for bikers on the West Coast. Is the company that was awarded the contract, is it local to the West Coast?
No, I don't believe so. I think Uplands is primarily out of Campbell River, but they have other offices throughout the island. Yeah.
Through the chair, they've done construction on trail work before.
You know, I actually am from Campbell River, so I've worked with Uplands on other construction and civil works before. So I don't know if they specifically have worked on trail work, but they are definitely qualified. And I believe they even provided like a detailed social procurement section within their bid, and where they're not just the lowest bid, they're also conforming, and we recommend award.
For the chair, thank you very much for that.
Great. Dr. Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So page 121, there's 80 hours for a project manager. And I'm wondering if that is one of our staff, or are we hiring somebody? Thanks.
Through the chair, the time requirements are all staff time. So procurement coordinator, project manager happens to be our lands and resources coordinator, but we're going to be supporting him with also our operations manager for this project and the grant coordinator. So that's all internal time. But McElhaney is the lead engineering firm. And so as part of their construction administration services, they have site supervision, and they're providing the oversight to make sure that the contract conforms to the design.
Great, thank you. Do we have a motion to do this? Dr. Siga, go ahead. You got to use the microphone.
Sorry. I'd like to move that the Alberta Clackamas Regional District Board of Directors award Traverse Trail Extension construction contract to Upland Contracting Limited in the amount of $1,171,412.50, excluding GST, and to authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute Traverse Trail Extension construction contract on behalf of the regional district.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Cote. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, Dr. Cote,
I
you got a
just-
comment? Sorry.
Just so happy that this is going through and that we received this grant.
It's been an epic journey and
It
we haven't
has.
even gotten on the trail yet. Yes. All right, thank you for that. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. Yes, it's been a long time coming. All righty, so that brings us to planning matters. I would just remind folks online that even if you are municipal in nature, we do need you for the purposes of forum. But that brings us into 9.1 and 9.1A, and that's the Banfield Water System Development Cost Charge Bylaw Review and Updates. And I don't know if it's Mike or Alex. Oh,
I snuck onto the
yeah,
planning
okay, there we go.
agenda. I'm
That's-
sorry.
Go ahead.
So this is just the final adoption for the DCC bylaw update. We took this to the Banfield Water Committee and did 3 readings in December, and then we were just waiting for the minister approval, which we received last week. So yes, this will finalize the bylaw, and then it will come into effect in 30 days.
Great. Bob, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Jack. I'd like to make the motion that the Alberta Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt the Banfield Water Systems Development Cost Charges Bylaw F1157-2022.
Ah, great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Roth. Any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Yeah, just the A directors. Thank you. Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item B, a rezoning application for South Banfield Road.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I'll take a few and then Mike will jump in here as well. So the first file we have before you is a public hearing, which is held for a rezoning application relating to the property at 294 South Banfield Road. The rezoning of the property and a portion of the foreshore would allow for the development of the commercial marina, clubhouse, and up to 24 cottages. The upland cottage development would be intended for short-term tourist-focused accommodation or temporary rental housing, and the commercial marina would replace the existing dock and accommodate up to 50 boat slips. An official community plan amendment to the Banfield OCP is also included with this application to redesignate the property from residential use to mixed use. The public hearing was held on March 28th with 3 members of the public in attendance. Public hearing report and minutes are presented for the board's consideration, and staff recommend that the board receive the report and minutes and proceed with second and third readings of the bylaws. We're happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Dr. Beckett, do we want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair Jack. I would like to make the motion that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Seconded by Dr. Roth. Thank you. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
That the bylaw P1459 Banfield Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Seconded by Director Roth. Thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And that bylaw P1459 Banfield Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Seconded by Director Roth. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. 2 more.
That bylaw P1460 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion
And
carried.
finally, Mr. Chair, the bylaw P1460 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Seconded by Director Roth. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item C, South Long Beach, public hearing report, et cetera, et cetera. Please go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Chair Jack. The South Long Beach OCP Amendment Bylaw P1447 includes policy amendments to the existing South Long Beach OCP that intend to align with the draft zoning bylaw as part of the zoning bylaw review project, which includes amendments to all 6 of the area OCPs. A public hearing for this OCP amendment bylaw was held on March 30th. There were 8 members of the public in attendance and 4 letters of public correspondence received. That correspondence, the agency referral comments, and the comments received at the hearing are detailed in the public hearing report and minutes. Staff recommend that the board receive the report and minutes and proceed with second and third readings of bylaw P1447. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering, Director Siga, if you wanted to go through this?
Thank you very much. I found it really interesting, just a comment that water security seems to be at the top of a lot of minds in the West Coast lately. That said, I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
That the bylaw P1447 South Long Beach Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Roth. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
And that bylaw P1447 South Long Beach Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Thank you for seconding, Director Roth. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All righty. That brings us to the Sprout Week official community plan amendment bylaw.
Thank you. The Sprout Lake OCP Amendment Bylaw P1443 also relates to the zoning bylaw review project, which intends to align policies with the draft updated zoning bylaw. This bylaw was given third reading by the board on March 22nd, following a second public hearing for this OCP amendment that was held on March 9th. In staff's opinion, all requirements for adopting the bylaw have now been met, and staff recommend that the board adopt bylaw P 1447. Thank you.
Director Cote?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to thank staff for all the work that they've put into this and 2 public hearings. It's been a long process, and happy to be moving on with this. So I would move that the memorandum and bylaw P1443, official community plan text and maps uploaded separately to the bylaw P1443, Sprout Lake official community plan amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Ross. Further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, this brings us to I think the star of the show, Sprout Lake Landing. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Jack. So yes, a public hearing was held relating to a rezoning application for the Sprout Lake Landing property, which is located at 10695 and 10720 Lakeshore Road. Property owners are applying to rezone a portion of the Sprout Lake Landing property south of Winder Creek from rural A2 district to tourist commercial C6 district in order to accommodate up to 15 cottage style accommodation units that would be operated as an extension of the existing hotel and restaurant complex. So a second public hearing for this application was held on March 27th. At this hearing, there were 26 members of the public in attendance and received as part of the public hearing record were 46 letters of correspondence, with 29 of those expressing opposition and 17 expressing support, as well as a petition signed by 69 residents in the area, further expressing opposition to the rezoning. The applicants presented information at the public hearing as well, detailing their proposal. The comments and correspondence relating to the proposed development are summarized in the public hearing report, and all of the comments provided are detailed within the public hearing minutes. I will highlight that for this file, public hearing minutes are uploaded separately to the ACRD website with the link included in the agenda, and there are hard copies available here in the boardroom as well. The report presents 2 options for the board to consider: proceeding with third reading of the bylaws or denying the application by defeating the bylaws. There has been significant public engagement on this file, as we know, and in staff's opinion, the applicants have responded to many of those concerns raised by the neighbors with the intention to mitigate the impact on the neighborhood and the environment. So that is further detailed in the staff report. And at this time, staff recommend that the board receive the public hearing report in minutes and proceed with third reading of bylaws P 1436 and P 1437. And we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Director Cote.
Thank you. So at this time, I would move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Seconded by Director Roth. Thank you. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you.
I just move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Seconded by Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Just saying that this is a very long public hearing. A lot of minutes, and hopefully the directors watched participated in the public hearing or actually read through all those many pages. So is there any questions or?
I don't know that there's any comments or questions. Yeah.
Okay. So just like to say that this is a very controversial application. It's been through 2 public hearings. The community has come forward with some, in my opinion, very valid concerns regarding the environment, sewage, concerns about future subdivision. So if the cabins were built now, there's always the opportunity to subdivide in the future. The letters of support were for increased tourism, and I don't believe that a lot of them were from the actual residents of Sprout Lake, reading where they came from. And I know that the applicants have said that it's not their intent for housing. But the density increase is very significant and would very much impact the community. So at this time, I would hope that the applicants come back with a different proposal. But at this time, I would move that the board defeat bylaws P1436 and P1437.
Director Beckett, go ahead. Are you seconding?
I am seconding that. I support that.
Thank you. Is the wording for that okay for the motion? Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, with that in mind, any further comments? Director Boyko, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I had the pleasure of sitting through the 3.5-hour public hearing, and there's lots of contentious issues on both sides. I am concerned, one thing about if we defeat this right now, the message it sends for further economic development in the area and what options the developer could present that would make the residents of Sproat Lake happy, because whether they drop the number of cabins or move them to a different area or something like that, what could they do to actually make the residents happy? Thank you.
Thank you. Was that a rhetorical question or was that directed at anyone? I just don't know.
It could be classified as a rhetorical question because they've already come back once with a bunch of changes and that did not make the residents happy. So what could they possibly put forward to make the residents happy? Thank you.
If it's either way, I think it's a good point, and I just wanted to make sure you had an ample opportunity to make it. Director Roth, go ahead.
Yes, I attended the public hearing too. And I think it's a great plan, actually. And looking at the area, it's definitely, you know, it's in keeping with the other commercial property right across the street and downtown too. So I'm hoping we don't deny it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Director Haggard.
I don't vote, but I would like to speak on this topic, but I would like to talk about it from a user point of view. For years and years, I used to rent a cabin at Sprout Lake for a week. In fact, the person I used to rent it from is here today. And I think I was a very good renter. I left the place clean. I was at a partier. We didn't increase traffic. I, took stuff out of my car, unpacked. I might go into town once during the week to get groceries. We didn't have a boat. The only reason I went there was from rest and relaxation, read a book on the sun deck and enjoy the view, take a swim. So right now there's nothing on Sproat Lake for somebody like me to go and use. And I think I would be a good target market for these cabins just to go out there. Unfortunately, there could be 100 people like me, but there might be one bad person, right? And that one bad person always wrecks their reputation. But I think we have to consider that most of the people are probably like me and just want to go out there and enjoy the sunshine and have a swim. And we're not going to steal. We're not going to bring crime out there. We're not going to do any of that other stuff that a lot of people mentioned. So there has to be some opportunity for people like me to enjoy the lake. I can't afford to buy from the lake, but I want to enjoy the lake.
Thank you, Director Haggard. I have Director Beckett and then Director Kurtze.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, and I appreciate Director Boyko's comments about trying to find what I phrased was a win-win situation. When I was in discussions with the neighbors, what is it that would be acceptable? But when I look at the whole process, I'm disappointed that that there wasn't, in my estimation, based on what I heard at the meeting, appropriate consultation between the proponent and the neighbors. I'm concerned about the fact that the OCP, is designated for what I believe is one single family residents on that property, and we're asking, or the proponent is asking to change the OCP. So I really am concerned about the value of the OCP and how that speaks to the community. But I won't go on other than to say that we've got, two different positions, the community's position and the client's position, and there seems to be no middle ground at this point in time. So that's why I did value Director Boyko's comments about, is there a process whereby we can go back and work with the neighbors and the proponent? And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Point well taken, I think. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I did point that out at the beginning when I said, I would like the applicants to go back and try to figure out a way that an application could move forward. At this time, in my opinion, I think that the issues that the residents of the area brought up are very, very valid. It is a very shallow bay. They're talking about extending the dock and the creation of possibility another 15 cabins or facilities that could hold 4 to 6 people in each one. This creates a huge density. You get those people in that shallow bay, boats coming in. The turbidity is already bad in that bay. I do water testing. I just did one a couple of weeks ago. One of the tests, I can't say where it came from, but one of the tests came back with very poor total coliforms in their test sample. I also have concerns about their driving people to a facility that the dock goes right out in front of our fire hall and is expected to be lengthened even farther. The density issue is really concerning to the neighbors. Like Director Beckett pointed out, right now it's zoned for 1 residential home. To put 15 cabins there, that's a huge increase. I think that there's better locations around Sprout Lake for development of that size. Don't want to stop tourism. This is not a housing issue option, which we're looking at through our housing study, saying that we need housing. This is not housing. So let's not confuse that issue. This is for tourism. The applicants have said, they have a wonderful plan, yes, but it's the actual location that they're trying to put this on, and the concerns that the community has brought back forward regarding the environment that I support. And as far as other options for places for Director Haggard to come and visit Sprout Lake, there is other options out there. There is a hotel that has 8 rooms that are available now to rent if you want to go and swim at Sprout Lake. Although I don't know that swimming from the dock there is the best option because it's very shallow, and if you've got boats coming, there's a safety issue. There's a lot of issues that are connected with this application. I would like to approve it, but in my opinion, there's too many valid issues that force me to move to deny this application as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Boyko and then Director Ross. And I think we're going to close it up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Final comments. So regarding location, the property in question only has 1 real direct neighbor, as opposed to many of the other applications we see that have 5, 6, or 8 or 10 different neighbors. It is close to the highway, so people aren't going to be traveling down Lakeshore Road all the way up and down to get in and out. If you go further down Lakeshore Road, you got a mobile home park, you got tall timbers, You got Maple Resort. Those kind of places would add a lot more to the traffic on Lakeshore Road than this current application. So there are a lot of potential concerns that the neighbors have, and a lot of them are valid, but some of them, it is not the worst place to put this kind of like development. Thank you.
Director Roth?
Yeah, I remember them speaking about the plan. And as far as tourism goes, and it wasn't just about Sprout Lake, it was also about taking tours to Dequillet and to Fino and to Bamfield and, you know, to the whole regional area. So it's not just about Sprout Lake. And I don't know, for that reason, I think it would bring a lot of economic development, a lot of money into the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So just to remind everyone, the motion is to deny second and third reading, or just second reading, I guess. Oh, sorry, third reading. So that's what we'll be voting on, just so you know. Okay, so with that in mind, we do have a mover and a seconder. I think we're all done for comments. Very good discussion. I'd like to voice my appreciation for the work that's being done by staff, as well as the conversations being had here. I think they're important. And I think that's, it is talking about a lot of things that I think over dinner or over drinks we could talk for hours about. So I appreciate the conversations that we're having. And I think I would just speak to the difficult position that decision makers at the board are often put in when these kind of things happen. What I've seen is, I think it speaks to something that was mentioned earlier. The process by which we go through for proponents applying to the board is one in which doesn't often actively contemplate the proponents creating relationships and engaging with the wider community. And what that does is that puts a lot of heat on our singular board member for an electoral area, and that makes it very difficult. Proponents in the future should always be thinking about not just speaking to applications, but creating a relationship with the community that they're trying to build in, so that this sort of thing doesn't happen, because it seems like it could have been avoided. And I think it's been touched on by multiple individuals here. I'd like to voice my appreciation for Director Cote and the steps she's taking to ensure that she has a full understanding of all of the aspects of her community. And despite, regardless of the decisions that are being made in the future, that work means something. Thank you. So with that in mind, unless there are any other comments, and I don't think there should be, we'll go to a vote. So this is in favor of denying the application, basically. It's denying third reading. Okay, so for all those in favor, please vote. And all opposed. Okay, so that is, sorry, all those in 3-3. So that means that the motion is defeated. So ties, so that means the defeat is defeated. Double negatives. Does make it positive. No, it does not make it positive. It just means we haven't done anything. So with that in mind, how is this going to go? Because if there's 6 members and I don't get the break a vote because I don't get a vote on these planning matters, if we try to go the other way, then we're looking at another 3-3 vote unless people change their votes. Yeah. So with that, do we have another motion after this defeated one? Director Roth, go ahead. Do we have a seconder? Oh, Director Roth read out the motion at the bottom of page 5 of the agenda. That's bylaw P1436, Sprout Lake Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw, be read at 13. Do we have a mover or a seconder? All right, thank you, Director Boyko. Further comment? Director Cote.
Thank you. I don't think this is funny at all. It's the community of Sprout Lake have spoken. The residents that live there, this is their official community plan. This is what they have decided. It took a long time in the past for us to come to agreement on our official community plan. I really don't believe that directors sitting at this table should be making a decision around a change like this in a community where so many people have come forward and spoke about the impacts that they will have on the community. There is more than one piece of property that attaches to this application. So just wanted to make that correction. There was a map that was provided that shows all of the properties around this application against this for very valid reasons. Water quality, the environment, this application, I wish I could support it, but it's on a piece of rock that has had very failing septic. So I don't know how you're going to do another 15 cabins worth of septic on a rock that was having a hard time accepting the sewage from the hotel that's there, the cafe that's there, the hotel that's there, restaurant, and now add this. It's not a huge piece of property. Like, I would love to support this. I'd love to see more tourism at Sprout Lake, but this is not the location to do it. And the residents that live there have brought up every valid reason why it shouldn't. And I just, the dollars coming into the other areas of the regional district is not a reason to approve something like this. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Beckett?
Thank you. I don't want to create any more potentially emotional discussions or dialogue. I have stated a couple observations that I made that moved me to not support this. In fairness, I do need to add that, when I did sit through the 3.5 hour meeting, and when I heard about the water quality, that was a concern for me. When I, heard about how the proponent handled a sewage issue treatment, I was concerned about that and the message it must have sent to the community. But I think the biggest thing for me is community's OCP and the value as a resident that we put on that. And I look at my own community of Bamfield and its OCP, and we are going to go through a review and perhaps some changes, but with anticipated growth down the road, that OCP is important to guide the community and give the community assurances that things won't change without appropriate discussion and review, and that's what we're doing today. And I stand firm on not supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beckett. Director Roth?
I just want to note that in the report from staff, it says that policy 8.2.4 of the Sprout Lake official community plan supports the expansion and location of tourist and neighborhood commercial services in the West Bay area. This area would also be included within the development permit area 3, objectives in form and character, allowing the regional district to regulate the development with guidelines relating to building and site details such as form and character of cottages, landscaping, screening, access, parking, signage, and lighting. So it actually is part of the OCP. It is part of it doesn't go against the OCP.
Thank you. Dr. Siga, go ahead.
I really appreciate coming to the table and learning from other people. Staff have sort of gone through all the processes, and my understanding is that the water, the sewer, the existing infrastructure has been considered. And I'll maybe ask them to speak to this. But first, I just want to make a comment that that little piece of on my drive from the West Coast to Port Alberni, that little piece of commercial development that's there is a welcome site on the Stormont Bank. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Alex or Mike take that?
I mean, we can quickly expand on the sewage aspect. So one of the conditions of rezoning approval that was applied by the board when this was considered for first reading was that there was confirmation, or that there would be confirmation from the registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewage disposal for the additional 15 units. As part of the second public hearing, a letter from an on-site wastewater professional was received, and that is a part of the package, and it analyzed the anticipated soil conditions and provides recommendations for the design and installation of a sewer system that would intend to meet Island Health's regulations for the new development. So that is a function of the process, and it is required by the board before you consider for adoption, I guess. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Thank you. Follow-up, Dr. Siga?
And through the chair, water security seems like a real issue, especially for the West Coast. And is there existing infrastructure to support the water need?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there was a referral response from Island Health that detailed the requirements for operating a private water system. So if the development proceeds and they operate a private water system that will be distributed between the 15 cottages, they would need to apply for a permit through Island Health to do so. And that it includes ongoing maintenance and quality testing and quantity testing as well. So that again is a technical consideration of the development. And if it were to proceed, it would be required prior to the issuance of a future building permit.
Thank you. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. So within the report in that was provided from Ministry of Health, future subdivision was indicated for the parcel. Possible health authority would not support this due to potential negative impacts. So when I read something like that, you have to take that into consideration of going forward of what could happen in the future. Applications come in and you really have to look at the location where it's going in and think about the future also of what the impacts are. One of the people at the public hearing talked about unexpected impacts, that unintended impacts that would happen because of what you think you're doing the right thing, but it has unintended impacts to the neighborhoods. And I think there's a lot of them that are associated with this application. Like I said, I would love to support it, but it's a piece of rock that's surrounded by water. Everything runs downhill. There's no way to get away from providing working septic, in my opinion, on a piece of rock that is feeding into a water source that people drink. A lot of people use this Sprout Lake water. It's just the wrong location for what they're applying for. Other areas, like there's other applications for tourism, housing, whatever on Sprout Lake, around Sprout Lake. And it's our job to make sure that they're put in the right place and that those unintended consequences are not going to affect the communities of which we represent, of which we were elected to represent and be their voice. And I think I've heard my community very loudly. There's petitions, the hearing, there was many people that live at Sprout Lake that were very committed to coming and making sure that this board heard them, saying that they are not wanting this development for valid reasons
And a lot of those people that I talked to, because a lot of them contacted me personally, talking about their concerns and saying that they had absolutely thanked the Old West Bay and Sprout Lake Landing for being part of our community and love to support them, but they don't want to see this expansion. They want to support them and want them to be successful, but this is not a part of what this community wants.
Thank you for that. Okay, any further comments? Director Boyko, go ahead.
Thank you, Director Coaching. Share concerns. My point comes back to the residents support the development and future of this property, but what could the developers come back with that would make the people happy? Your second point about septic fields and water, I think everybody that lives around Sprout Lake has a septic field that goes into the lake or is close to the lake at some point, and I think everybody also takes water in the lake too. So that's a concern shared by every resident out there at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Cote?
Thank you. I just want to point out the density. Every household, my household, there's 2 people. My septic field is way back away from the lake. On the roadside of my property, there's no stream that runs through my property. Yeah, I've taken every measure, make sure that septics are maintained. I know that the previous owner of the Sprout Lake Landing was not maintaining that septic with the density that they had. And I know it wasn't working. I could smell it when I drove by. Absolutely. I've seen all the pictures of the runoff that comes to the creek at the side, Weiner Creek. There's a swamp on the other side. There's a highway ditch that runs into the creek. And there's the ditch on the water side, and it all runs to the lake where people drink that water. So thank you.
Okay, in regards to the density, I have a question. I don't know if Alex or Mike have this off the top of your head. In terms of density for the lots that are out there, your septic density, does it presuppose a certain number of users, individuals living inside the house? Like, I don't know how that works. And what is how do you compare what you planned for to the actual?
That's a very good question. And there are some numbers that are included in the MSR engineering report that are received as part of public hearing minutes. I'm not going to pretend to be an engineer with expertise in wastewater, but at the regional district level, what we look for is a system that is designed by a qualified professional, and they will look at things like maximum load and standard occupancies based on the type of use, whether it's a single family residential home or a smaller cottage. So at the end of the day, when we're considering a building permit, we're looking for a seal of approval from a wastewater practitioner who is certified to determine whether that meets the Allen Health standards.
Okay. And that has that. I just remember seeing that in motions, and it's not here, but that's because it's covered in separate motions. Is that correct?
So if I just, so as Alex mentioned, we rely on other professionals for the sewage disposal, but for every rezoning application, their staff always has a recommendation that condition of adoption is that the site is the density or what is proposed is capable of meeting the on-site sewage requirements. So that's in every rezoning application. It's not something, it's good practice. It's something that the board has always supported. So what we do is if it's a positive recommendation for first reading, it'll come back with what are the conditions that they meet, that a wastewater practitioner or other professional provides confirmation that the proposal is capable of meeting on-site sewage requirements. And in this case, that's what the applicants have done.
Okay, that was the refreshing reminder because I remember reading that. I just didn't see where. Thank you for that. Okay. Further comments? Director Roth and then Director Cote and then Director Beckett.
And this is through the chair, but to Mike. So say that VHA said it doesn't meet those requirements and perhaps there had to be less, they could reduce the numbers to 14 or 13 or whatever it is. Is that possible to happen too?
Yes, it is possible. And we'll talk about that in a later application.
Okay, Director Cote and then Director Beckett.
Thank you. So in your package, Ministry of Health talked about the sewage, and they said the total had to be able to exceed 2.7 whatever a day, gallons or whatever it is, and that they said that that possible health authority would not support due to potential negative impacts should this property be subdivided. So you build these, and then the fear from the community is that the business case doesn't work and the hotel has to make changes, and they sell off these individual cabins, or the residents call them homes, because they're not in a hotel. They're separate. So you could actually strata that piece of land, and that would be 15 homes then that they're talking about. And if there are 4 people per home, that's 60 people. So you put 60 people on a small piece of property like that with sewage going into one little place. That's why Ministry of Environment or Health is saying that they wouldn't support this because of the negative impacts should it be subdivided. And I don't know the difference in my mind. I don't understand the difference between if it's subdivided or if it's all in one piece. All I picked up from that was that they would not support this due to the negative impacts of the sewage. When you start adding on the hotel, the cafe, the store, and the hotel, and the sewage also going up there, and they're talking about increasing the tourism. That's going to impact that as well. So I keep coming back to the fact that it's a rock that's surrounded by water, that all water runs downhill and washes down into that lake where people drink. So huge impact.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate and to clarify the Island Health response that's included within the agency referral comments received at the board. So the Island Health referral says that all sewerage systems which have a domestic sewage flow of less than 22.7 cubic meters per day are subject to the sewerage system regulation, or the SSR. Proposed sewerage system with domestic sewage flows of 22.7 cubic meters per day or more will be referred to the Ministry of Environment. So any construction, alteration, or repair to a sewerage system must be completed by an authorized person as defined in the SSR. Essentially, they have a threshold that if you get above 22.7 cubic meters per day, it gets referred to the Ministry of Environment. And again, we would be looking at the staff level when we're considering future development applications or building permit applications, we would be looking for advice from the wastewater professional on whether that threshold is met.
Okay, so that'll be checked, and if it's not met, then there are consequences. Okay. Director Beckett, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to either Alex or Mike, is there a mechanism that rather than the board voting to either move the third reading or deny the third reading, before we do that, is there a mechanism in place where the board can ask the proponent to attempt to readdress this issue, recognizing that at this point in time, there could be a that the board is struggling with this decision.
Thanks, Bob. I think that can be handled after this vote. We'll see where we're at there. But that's the next conversation after this, depending on what happens. Director Boyko, I think you'll have last word.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Regarding potential future subdivisions, is that on the table with the current zoning that's being requested now? Or would that have to be a whole other application at some point in the future? So is it a concern at this moment, or would it be concern in the future if there is a potential strata or separation of lots and that kind of thing? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Boyko. The proposed zoning, which is the tourist commercial C6 zoning, could facilitate subdivision. So if they were to look at a building strata type of development, then that zoning could facilitate that. The applicants have indicated that's not their preference right now, but just so the board is clear that it is likely that the zoning that they've applied for could facilitate subdivision.
Can I have a quick follow-up, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. So would they have to do a separate application to the board to subdivide in the future, or would they just be able to do it straight ahead with the future zoning now? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. They would not necessarily have to make a separate application to the regional district board at that time.
Yeah, they just have to follow the policy as written, which is why the OCP matters, because you can presuppose that kind of thing. Lots to consider. Okay, I think that's it for conversation now. So this is the regular motion. Are we missing anybody? No, we're still here. With that in mind, this is the motion that is in your kits for the OCP bylaw 1436, P1436. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, motion defeated. Okay, now we're going to handle what Director Beckett has stated. I think that we're at loggerheads partly because of the way that the community has received the engagement or lack of engagement, and that makes it a bit of a difficulty. With that in mind, I do think that the board should pursue the line of questioning that Director Boyko has outlined. When do you get to yes? Or is it no because of personal or base reasons, right? And so with that in mind, I don't know what that looks like, but it's clear we're not going anywhere at the moment. So perhaps we have a motion to further investigate. Director Roth, go ahead.
I'm just curious, how do you break it up? Or isn't it Robert's Rule of Order that the chair votes?
So I don't know how that works with planning because my community is not involved in any of the planning. Yeah, so it's been indicated that that's not the case. So this makes it quite challenging. I think the next step, though, in a good faith scenario is to explore what can work. And that's a conversation not just with the community, but also with the proponents, because there may be a line where it just doesn't work economically, and that matters too, right? So I would point out that the recommendation was to go forward with this. So they did cross their T's and check their I's, like the work was done. So this has to do with more popularity and where you want the community to go. That's generally handled through the OCP processes. So I think this is a longer slog, but I don't know what that looks like. Daniel, do you have any suggestions?
I think given the scenario, you're still in a situation where you're not advancing. And so just because the defeat was defeated, but also the advancement was defeated, you're really not advancing. And so from a staff perspective, we will take it back and have discussions. I don't think the board needs to do anything more today. A deferral is not required. The motions were spoken to by the board. at a staff level, we'll take this back. We'll have discussions to see if there's any wiggle room based on the conversation we heard, and to have a discussion with the proponent to see whether there's a willingness to make something different. The board does have the ability to reconsider, and the chair can lead that. But given the conversation, I think the chair would likely want to have a few additional pieces of information based on the dialogue that's going on. And I would recommend that we move forward, and staff will take a close look and have the necessary conversations with the proponent who's made the applications to see if there's, like I said, if there's any room for adapting or cause for reconsideration.
Thank you. Dr. Steer, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick, just for my own understanding of process. So this is directed to Mr. Select. Is there a time frame for the chair to reconsider a motion on the table? If I remember correctly, is there a 30-day time frame, or just please correct me?
Again, I'm not reading legislation, but if my memory serves, it's a 30-day. And typically what you see is at the next meeting. So we'd be looking at April 26th. If there were going to be any motion to reconsider. You don't have to reconsider it on the 26th, but the chair ought to make a decision as to whether or not it's coming back at that point.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, I was not banking on the conversation going this far, so I'd like to call for a 5-minute recess. I have to go to the washroom. So with that, we'll be back at 3:45. We stay connected or not. Thank you. We'll pick it up with item F. Thanks for coming, Tom. Good to see you. Okay, I think that brings us back to the regular agenda now. With that in mind, that brings us to item F, which is a development variance permit for Sprout Lake. Alex or Mike, did you want to introduce this quickly?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So this is a development variance for 8467 Buffalo Road. This is in the Sprout Lake area. The variance would reduce the watercourse setback to 8 meters or 26 feet to allow for the construction of a detached garage on the property. The board considered this application on the March 22nd meeting and initiated the neighbor notification process. No correspondence was received from the public, and staff recommended the board issue the development variance at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. Not so controversial. I would move that the Board of Directors issue development variance permit DVD 22006.
Seconded by Dr. Ross. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay. In the interest of time, once we get to certain, actually, I don't know that there's many left, but when we talk about public hearing, minutes, second reading, that sort of thing, you can just say, move the public hearing, move the minutes, that sort of thing. It'll save us 30 seconds here and there. With that in mind, we'll move into item G, which is another development variance permit for Sprout Lake. Go ahead.
My turn for a bit. So this is a development variance for 10191 Bishop Drive in Sprout Lake, and it is a proposed development variance to increase the height of an accessory building, a garage, from 12 feet to 17 feet. It was reviewed and supported by the Sprout Lake ABC on April 4th. And the reason for the height variance is it would allow the garage to match the roof line design of the house. And I would just note that there is no other suitable building site on the property for the garage. It's a steep lot in relation. So staff are recommending that the board proceed with this first step in the variance process, and if approved, staff would notify the neighbors. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. I would move that the Board of Directors consider issuing development variance permit DVD 22009, subject to neighboring properties being notified as per the Local Government Act 499.
Thank you. We have seconded. Thank you, Dr. Roth. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Next up is item H, Sprout Lake again. Please go ahead.
Yes, so again, this is another development variance for 9778 Sterling Arm Crescent. So the board did initially review this application at the last board meeting. The neighbors have been notified. Staff have not received any feedback or letters. The APC reviewed it again at their April 4th meeting and supported the application. And again, staff recommend issuing the variance. And I would note for this variance, it's converting a garage to a house, so there would be no increase in the footprint of what's there right now based on this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. I would move that the Board of Directors issue development variance permit DVD 2322002.
Seconded by Director Roth. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to Beaver Creek OCP amendment bylaw. Please go ahead.
Yes, so the Beaver Creek OCP amendment bylaw that's related to the overall zoning bylaw project and the other OCPs that we have been working through is presented for adoption. And in discussions with the directors for Beaufort and Beaver Creek, staff have also made some changes to the draft zoning bylaw, and there's some associated recommendations that come after that. And what's proposed that is that these changes would only or would specifically apply to Beaver Creek and Beaufort OCP areas. That's something that legally, within North Government Act, we can do that. And were made at the request of the directors. I would just note that the other part of this is that following the zoning bylaw project update, the work plan is to do a comprehensive review of all 6 ACRD OCPs and have a good discussion around some of the items that have been brought up, at the public hearing for some of the OCPs and discussions with directors around around keeping of animals, but also around home occupation and home industry. And happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Roth, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to make one change. And that would be instead of 2 acres to 0.06 of an acre for number 1 here, just for the area of Beaver Creek. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with everything. Understanding that the home industry issue will be covered later, like we said, in a comprehensive review. But I'd like to know if you have any idea of when that would be.
Okay, just for clarity first, do you mean 0.6
Yes.
acres?
Acres.
Okay, because you said 0.06, which is really
sorry.
small. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, okay, because that is literally a hen house. So,
No, I meant 0.6 acres. Or sorry, yeah, 0.
yep, that's correct. Okay. Let's just use hectares, guys. Okay. So
Like I'm prepared to move that.
I think if that's what you want to do, all you have to do is just read a different number.
Okay. So do I need to read the whole thing, or can I say the whole motion? I'd like to make the motion as presented, except in the first bullet to change it from 2 acres to 0.6 acres and larger in the Beaver Creek OCP area.
So if I could make a suggestion and recommendation that the Beaver Creek OCP is adopted first. And then go
yes.
to the others.
Yeah, it's not an
So
and.
certainly.
Let's do the first one. Yeah. Thank you for that.
I'd like to move that bylaw P1444 Beaver Creek Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Okay, there we go.
Okay, and I'd like to move that the following changes to the draft zoning bylaw be made. Number 1, permit an unlimited number of poultry, chicken, hens, roosters, etc. on all lots 0.06 acres and larger in the Beaver Creek OCP area. And then the rest of the motion would apply as written.
Okay, so as written, number 2 and number 3. As
Yes.
long as the board is clear with that, that should be okay. Thank you. Director Boyko, you have a comment?
Yes, first I'd like to second that motion. And I want to just clarify something with the planning staff. Is that with all three of these items? Okay, I'm just reading it here. Yeah, okay, so they would all apply to Beaver Creek and Beaufort OCPs. Okay, thank you.
Did you just answer your own question? Yeah, or did you need a response?
I believe I did. Just double reading everything here, but yes, it would apply to both. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Okay. Any further comments or questions? Director Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So seems like a big change from 2 acres to 0.6 of an acre. Is there many 0.6 of an acre properties in Beaver Creek?
Yes, there is, and in the memo with the adoption, there's an appendix attached, and at the end of the appendix, there's a summary of the number of lots, based by lot size. This would apply to a large number of properties, in the majority of properties in Beaver Creek.
I had a question in regards to the number of chickens because I immediately go to the ridiculous. I'm picturing like 1,000 chickens stacked in pens on a small lot. I know that wouldn't care that happens. Are there other regulations that restrict that? There are. Director Boyko, go ahead.
Yeah, we had a long discussion at a town hall at the Beaver Creek Hall about 3.5 weeks ago about this issue. And it comes down to food security and things like that. But there's no provincial regulation that says you can have so many chickens on so many acres. But there are animal welfare guidelines that would apply to this. So if someone it's the same thing as if you had a puppy farm and you had 1,000 dogs on your property, that wouldn't be allowed for animal safety. And it would apply to chickens and roosters and everything else as well, that those animal welfare guidelines from the BC government would still apply.
Thanks. I just thought that needed to be said out loud for future reference. I think people who don't know as much about rural life would need to know that. Thank you. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. So just remembering all of the conversations that we've had in the past, this is strictly chickens and no roosters, right? On that small of a property.
The way it's written, it would apply to all poultry, including roosters.
So there was specific size of a lot that was recommended because of the rooster. I remember our bylaws officer getting many calls about roosters, and I'm just thinking that that was the reason why the larger lots were recommended going forward. So I'm just thinking that bylaws are going to be hearing from residents again complaining about roosters.
Thank you. I think you're going to places like the edges of the policy, and I think that matters. Director Boyko, go ahead.
Yeah, I can talk about that, Cote, or Director Cote, sorry. Thank you, Chair. So we made it very clear to everybody in the town hall that if this thing goes ahead, we're going to rely on a good neighbor policy rather than bylaw enforcement. And that if you do not have a bylaw that says you cannot have roosters, then that you can't call bylaw to come to your aid and talk to the neighbors for you. So we made it very clear to everybody, and there is over 95% support from everybody there in the Beaufort and Beaver Creek areas specifically that they would support this. Thank you.
Given sample sizes, I have faith in Beaufort because that's like the Beaufort population, but like of households, but the Beaver Creek part, I'm just really worried about bad actors and bad behavior. That being said, if you want to give it a shot, I guess. Any further comments, Dr. Sparrow?
All those divisions around how many acres you need or hectares for a rooster, it doesn't say how far your property line, usually 15 feet or 15 meters. So if you don't like your neighbor, you put the rooster 15 meters from his house. I mean, right, there is pros and cons to both sides. I've had acreage and I've had roosters, and my rooster used to crow whenever it felt happy. And it's a very happy rooster. So middle of the night was fine too. So they can be annoying, but the neighbors didn't complain.
I have read articles about that. You know, you don't like your neighbor, you put up a pig pen right next to the border there. Yeah. But that's the good, I don't know how the good neighbor policy is enforced around these parts. That being said, any further comments? So it has been moved, I believe, and seconded. Seeing none. Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Your motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item J. It looks like we're still in Beaver Creek.
Yes.
So please go ahead.
Yes, so this is a rezoning application for 6222 Fern Road in Beaver Creek. This is a 1.9 acre property that is proposed to be rezoned to RA3. The applicant has now met all conditions of rezoning, and staff recommend that the board adopt this bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Dr. Roth?
Yeah, I'd like to move as written.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Siga. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, rezoning application Beaver Creek. You go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is this bylaw. The next three applications were all part of a public hearing that was held on March 23rd. So we dealt with three rezoning applications at one public hearing. So I will speak to the public hearing report and minutes first, and then I'll introduce each application individually before the board considers those bylaws, if that's okay. So a public hearing for bylaws 1450, 1456, P1470, and P1471 was held on March 23rd. Director Roth chaired the public hearing. 3 members of staff attended. In addition to the applicants, there were 3 members of the public. The HRD received 2 letters ahead noting general concerns with increased density. 1 member of the public raised concerns at the meeting about the developments, and staff recommend at this stage that the board proceed with receiving the public hearing report and the public hearing minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Roth?
Yeah, I'd like to make that motion.
So we'll do the hearing report first.
Sure.
Thank you, seconder. Thank you, Director Sparrow. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried.
Now I'd like to move receiving the public hearing minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Further comments? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, and now back to Mike.
Yes, so the first rezoning application relates to 5605 Mercy Road, and it's bylaw P1456. So part of the rezoning application, one of the conditions was that confirmation that the soils could meet the proposed development. So this originally the proposal was for 0.6 of an acre lots, and the wastewater practitioner determined that it could support down to a 1 acre minimum parcel size, rather than the original 0.6. So the owner has provided a letter and stated at the public hearing as well that they agree to lowering the density to 1 acre and changing the rezoning to RA2 rather than the RA3, which the RA2 has the 1 acre minimum parcel size. And I would note that this is permitted under the Local Government Act, and this can happen after a public hearing. So the owners agreed to reducing the density. And so staff, there's 3 motions presented. The first one would be to amend the zoning bylaw. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And you can amend the zoning bylaw because we're past first reading, but we're still in second, third, so there's plenty of
Yes, so amended before second reading, and then give it second reading.
Cool. Thank you. Director Cote?
Thank you. So this subdivision would have how many houses or buildings, structures on 1 acre?
So the zoning bylaw would allow 1 house on each lot as well as one accessory dwelling unit.
And further comment? Okay, seeing none. It has been moved and seconded?
No,
No? Okay.
I'll move that bylaw P1456. Regional District of Alberta and Poiquat, the third one.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's clear. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Is it okay to carry on?
Yeah, just second reading as amended.
Okay, yeah, second reading as amended. I'll move that.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And I'll move the third time as amended.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's not as amended, it's just read a third time, right? We
Oh,
had a
because
typo
it's
in
not
there,
amended,
just noticed.
because it's already been changed.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right. Duly noted and corrected in the past. Okay, so third reading, just normal.
That's right.
Okay. And seconded by? Thank you, Director. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carried. Thank you. All right. Yeah, we only need as amended if we didn't do that third motion. I gotta remember that procedurally. Thank you. That brings us to item L.
Yes, thank you. So this is the second application that was part of that public hearing. The applicant, Bill Courts, spoke to his application, and this rezoning, if it proceeds, would rezone a portion of this 4.5 acre property to allow for a subdivision, and staff recommend that the board give second and third reading to bylaw P1470. And again, happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Director Roth.
Yeah, I'd like to move as presented.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have a seconder. Thank you, Director Seeger. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carried. Thank you.
I'd like to move the third reading or third time.
Yep, third reading. Thank you, Director Seega. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And that brings us to item M, Still Beaver Creek. Go ahead.
Yes, so this was the third rezoning application we considered at this public hearing. And it is for 603 Kirkpatrick Road. The applicant's applying to rezone a 2.8 acre parcel to RA3 to facilitate a 3-lot subdivision. I would note that the RA3 allows for 0.6 of an acre minimum lot size, and staff recommend that bylaw P1471 be read a second and a third time. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Dr. Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll ask again, there's, in the subdivision, there would be what allowed on these, this 0.6 of an acre?
So at 0.6 of an acre, they would be allowed one single family dwelling and accessory uses, but not an accessory dwelling unit. That requires a 1 acre. So there's nothing that says if somebody has a minimum of 0.6 acre parcel size that they have to go that small. They can still make it 1 acre larger. So just want to clarify that for the board. So even under RA3, if it's less than an acre, but obviously greater than 0.6, then they're allowed one single family dwelling. If a parcel is greater than 1 acre, they'd be allowed that one single family dwelling plus an accessory dwelling.
Thanks, Dr. Roth.
I'd like to move as presented that the bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Seega. Comments? All those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Okay. Oh, we're not quite there yet. Or no, we were. Sorry, yeah.
And I'll move.
Please go ahead.
Move a third time.
Have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Comments? Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to Cherry Creek rezoning application. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I'll speak to this one. So a public hearing was held on April 3rd for a rezoning application relating to a property located at 5447 Maybell Road in the Cherry Creek area. The property owners are applying to rezone the property to a split zone of RA3 district and the cottage residential RC1 district to allow for one residential lot to be subdivided at the east end or rear end of the lot, and for the addition of up to 4 rental cottages to be developed on the remainder. This rezoning application is also accompanied by an amendment to the Cherry Creek OCP to redesignate the property from rural use to residential use in order to facilitate that 0.6 acre minimum density. The public hearing was attended by 19 members of the public, and there were 5 letters of correspondence that were received. The comments and correspondence received from the public at the hearing were generally held in opposition to the rezoning application as presented. The comments are summarized in the public hearing report and again provided in detail in the minutes. Many of the commenters expressed general support for the residential subdivision component and opposition for the rental cottage uses. So the staff report that we presented for you includes options for proceeding with second and third readings of the bylaws, or considering denying the application by defeating the bylaws. The board also has the option in this case to proceed with the OCP amendment to residential use and then not proceed with the cottage zoning as well. At this point, the staff recommendation that is presented for you is to receive the public hearing report in minutes and to proceed with second and third readings of both bylaws P1454 and P1455 as presented. And we're happy to answer questions.
Great. Dr. Sparrow?
It was nice to hear from people from Cherry Creek and then their opinions on what they want to do. And they came out, and I like that because their opinions have to be reflected on what they want to do here. And as it was reported, there was significant concern raised by the neighbors about the cottage residential use. And there was support for the subdivision split use, what they wanted to do. So I support the OCP amendment to the residential use, but I don't support the movement forward rezoning application for the cottage residential use, because the zoning around there is all 2 acres roughly. So if bylaw P1455, the zoning amendment is defeated, I understand that the applicant could reapply for a more appropriate residential use, which was reflected by the people who came to the meeting. So
I think that's a statement of fact, yes. Yeah. Did you want to proceed with the motions that you want to move forward? And I think we just don't need to do anything after that.
okay.
Yeah.
We want to do the motions? Okay.
Yes, please.
That the board of directors receive the public hearing report.
Seconder. Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? All those in favor? Motion carried.
That the board of directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Thank you, Director Cote, for seconding. All those in favor? Motion carried.
That bylaw P1454 Cherry Creek Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you, Director Ross. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
The
Motion carried.
Oh,
please go ahead.
That bylaw P1454 Cherry Creek Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Amended by Director Ross. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so for these last ones, do we just deny? Would that be the motion? Or not proceed? Either way. Okay.
And that bylaw P1455 Regional District Alberni Clay Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be denied.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Cote. Further comment? Go ahead, Director Ross.
What's the plan?
We've already accepted the OCP amendments to go to a residential, but doing it this way means that the other action that was contemplated doesn't move forward, but they can come back at a certain point with a different plan. So that's, from what I understand, what Director Sparrow wants to do. Okay with the OCP amendments, but the actual individual's plan for those properties, and not down for it.
Subdivision goes through, but the colleges are not safe.
All right, thank you. And we won't need to do another motion. If you defeat second reading, you don't need to go to third. Okay, so with that, all those in favor? All opposed? Director Boyko, did you have a question? Go ahead. You're
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself there. Just a quick question, just about clarification here. So what options would the applicant have to come back? I'm just wondering what that would actually look like.
So the applicants would need to come back with an amended rezoning application, and I think what the conversation and the motions are heading towards is that the board may be more receptive to a residential use, so they could be applying for like an RA3 zoning or an RA2 zoning to do a residential use subdivision. What defeating that bylaw P1455 would do would deny the rental cottage use and the rental cottage component of what their plans are. So at the end of the day, the applicants will need to come back to the regional district with an amended rezoning application that staff would review and then bring forward to the APC and the board for review.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex.
Okay. All right, we'll restart that vote. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. All right, that's that. All right, that brings us to 9.2, which is all directors. Yeah. I'm worried now that she actually wanted to remove herself from the Heatherington one rather than the one we just looked at. No? Okay. Doesn't she live in Beaver Creek though?
No, she's not there.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, by the winery. Okay. Yeah. I used to live on Lock Road, so I used to walk down. Yeah. Welcome back. Okay, so this next one is 9.2, all directors. So this is the Sprout Lake flood remediation strategy correspondence. Mike, please go ahead.
Thank you. So the Sprout Lake Community Association has requested the ACRD work with other agencies to have the obstruction near Sprout Lake Weir removed. The report's attached to the letter, and staff recommended the board receive the letter and proceed with the development of a floodplain bylaw, which is currently in the ACRD work plan planned for 2024. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cote?
Thank you. I think that they would like the Bob's Rock removed. I don't know about the weir. Just for clarification.
Who are they?
Sprout Lake Community Association.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
There's a letter that should be attached at the last pages.
Did I say the weir instead of the rock?
Yeah.
Sorry. It's the rock near the weir. So the request is that a rock be removed to allow additional flow out of Sprout Lake. Sorry, and I do apologize. And the rock is located near the Sprout Lake weir. Sorry, I clarify that. Thank you, Director Cote. And I'm still happy to answer any other questions.
I feel like that rock has heritage value because we've talked about it for so long. Okay, thank you. With that, Director Cote?
Okay, so I would move that the board accept this letter for information.
And just period after
Period.
that? Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Roth. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Everyone's got to vote, guys. And motion carried. Thank you.
So further,
I think that brings us to the end of 9.2, unless.
the option.
Oh, sorry, I'm running off of an agenda.
Oh, okay.
Please go ahead.
So there's options that were provided at the end of the report to direct staff to approach Mosaic Forest Management Corp. And the province per the Sprout Lake Community Association's correspondence to request approval and assistance to modify, remove the rock face downstream of the Catalyst Weir And 2, to direct staff to assess costs for determining downstream effects of mitigation. Option number 4, widening a section of channel at a constriction 230 to 460 meter downstream of the weir on all associated stakeholders. I'll leave that for the moment
As a comment or a motion?
as a motion.
So option 4, is that correct?
Option 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, the trustee, I think it'll take too long. Okay.
Yes. So part of the community association's letter was to ask for this to be put on our strategic plan.
Okay.
Made a priority on the strategic plan. And further, I've been to the Vancouver Island climate change climate leadership plan, and they're talking about supporting healthy lands and waters, goals to help mitigate climate change and increase resiliency of communities to adapt, develop plans to assess capacity, durability, and redundancy of water management systems, runoff drinking water, non-potable under potential climate change scenarios. And I think this kind of does fall into that scenario. So I know that this group is actually working on these scenarios, and they're looking at watershed management and understanding these situations further. I've asked for staff because I think that the information that we have, in my opinion, is incomplete because we don't have the other side. We have flood, but we don't have the drought information. And I've asked for staff to look for a grant so that we could actually do a drought study as well as the flood, because I think there's two sides to that. Thank you. So
Okay, so how do we reflect that in a motion? Like what you said?
I think the motion that the options that were provided would help to
Yeah. Okay.
bring that forward.
Okay, so can we have a seconder for that then? Thank you, Director Roth. Any further comments? Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, that brings us to reports, of which there are none, unfinished business, of which there isn't. And that brings us to late business. We have one item, and that's a request to bring back a report under the procedures bylaw regarding, I think, voting. Director Boyko, is that correct? Please go ahead.
Yes, I'll be quick here because I know we're getting late. Thank you, Chair. I would like to add a motion to the next public board meeting to amend the procedures bylaw A1075. This is around the recording of votes. The Alberni-Claycott Regional District is the only regional district on Vancouver Island that does not, unless specifically asked for by a director, record the votes for each vote on a regular basis. In the spirit of openness, transparency, and accountability, this is to basically set up for the staff to go and do some report and get back to us in the next meeting. Basically change the line on part 17 Charlie of the procedures bylaw. What it currently states, where a member calls for a recorded vote, the names of the members voting in favor and those opposed shall be recorded by the corporate administrator. Amend it to read something similar to the names of the directors who vote against the question shall be entered into the minutes. For example, this would change the potential minutes to read motion carried unanimously as opposed to just motion carried, or motion carried, but these directors voted against it. The BC legislation for regional board meeting states, most meetings are open to the public to facilitate transparency and accountability of the council of the board, and transparency or fairness of the meetings and decision-making process of elected officials are central to the principles of accountable government. And lastly, the BC Ombudsperson has some best practices for local government. They state the local governments across Canada are moving towards more open and transparent decision-making, and they facilitate citizen participation in the policy development and decision-making process and serve to build public trust and confidence in local government. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I would just add that I wouldn't mind if the report just has some information on how we can incorporate the hybrid format and that sort of thing. I'm not opposed to that. I am looking at my watch, wondering if this will add time, but I think there are other things we can do to mitigate the increased time and some of these things, depending on how it works. That being said, I think this could modernize the procedures bylaw in a good way. Wondering if we have a seconder. Thank you, Dr. Roth. Any further comments? Dr. Sparrow, go ahead.
I know at the end of the board meeting was just, speak as one voice on what was sent here and carried, and then you have also the report saying, but you oppose this, but now you have to go outside and speak on behalf of what is done. So it looked different, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so then that's something that boards will have to take into consideration when choosing a board chair and vice chair. So as the spokesperson for the entire board, I have to have a measure of respect, even if a vote goes in a way that I don't agree with. And I think that's covered off in our code of conduct as well. So I can't act against anything I don't agree with, but I do have to fairly represent what I think the board's intent was. So if you vote for something that I'm opposed to, right? But I think that's more of a governance decision than selecting the chair. I think things still work out if we do it this way too. Yeah, I think it is just probably a way to update for transparency's sake and accountability every 4 years. Director Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to writing names down or whatever. I know that there's a bit of an issue with people not being able to see us in the board and how we vote on the Zoom. So it would give some clarity there. But carrying that forward as to what the chair said, the chair is the spokesperson, and we're not supposed to go out and say, like people can see on if you're Zooming and you vote yes or no, people of your community or whoever wants to talk to you about an issue, you still have to side with the board.
Yes. So you don't really intimate that the vote was wrong or people are stupid and that sort of thing, but you can explain why you voted no and what you hope to achieve in the future and that sort of thing. So it's not meant to take away from people's ability to be who they are and represent their communities as is. It's just making sure that things are pretty clear in the future, right? Like, oh, you can bring up that this person voted yes here, but then no here, and there's a discrepancy, right? And so those things can matter, especially when some votes are tied or come down to 3 or 4 votes. So with that in mind, I think this is welcome, and thank you, Dr. Boyko. With that in mind, if there aren't any other comments, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us into the question period. I'm wondering if we have anyone who has sent in any emails.
Mr. Chair, no, there were no emails sent to the responses email address, but we do have 2 attendees online. If the attendees had any questions for directors, I ask that you now put it in the Q&A section on Zoom.
And while we're doing that, I would note we have 2 individuals still in the gallery. Wondering if you had any questions or comments from the public. And if you do, please stand up and use the microphone. And yeah, just be clear. Thank you. Oh, and you have to introduce yourself and say where your address is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Brian Soden. I'm from 10745 Lakeshore Road. I just have a comment and a question regarding the Sprout Lake Landing application. As far as the professional report done by J.E. Anderson, that was done by the applicant himself. And so I'm not sure if that's proper or not to present to the planning department. And then they had another company provide a backup report for the sewage system. And they put in there that they did not do a site visit. They only based on the J.E. Anderson report and photos from space from Google, and also the soils map from BC. And it's not as good as a shovel test on site. So I'm just wondering if the planning department, that's okay to do your own professional report for your own application and present it as, would be fair. And the other comment one of the directors had made about the access from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for this subdivision. It will be solely on Lakeshore Road. It will not be Highway 4 at all. They have not been given permission to access Highway 4. So 100% of the traffic would be onto Lakeshore Road. I think, and then maybe in the future, if it does go to the next board meeting, we'd like to do another presentation if that's possible.
Yeah, if it does go to the next meeting, it will. So it'll be at the meeting that we do address it. So, okay.
And one other comment that I'd like to make is that the owners of Sprout Lake Landing sat down and had individual meetings with the Sprout Lake residents. So we were in full consultation with them, what their plans were. And that's one of the reasons why they kind of updated their things and brought in more information. But they did communicate with us and we spoke to them. And so we were well informed of what they were doing and what they planned to do. And that's why we had the opposition we did. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. With that, I'm wondering if Mike or Alex wanted to say anything?
Just with regard to the Professional Engineers Association, we rely on professional engineers and we do not monitor them. They have their own association that would deal with that. So we will accept the reports from a professional engineer.
Thank you. Dr. Boyko, go ahead.
As a professional engineer, there are a bunch of ethics that we need to abide by. And for example, if I sign off on my own stuff, planning department will shut me down and it's unethical. So the applicant applying to get another person, professional, to do their septic field and other things is the accepted way of doing things. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay, that brings us to the end of the question period, unless there are any other responses from those individuals.
No, Mr. Chair, there are not.
Okay, it's probably media then. With that, well, I'm wishful thinking, I think. With that, I think that brings us into recess for the Aboriginal Health for the Regional Districts Hospital District meeting. So if I could have a motion to recess. Thank you, Director Siga, seconded by Director Sparrow. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Help you, Deb. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Hospital District Board of Directors meeting to order and recognize we're conducting this meeting on the unceded territories of the Shuswap and Huipechesed First Nations. And we have directors calling in from other First Nations areas. We'd like to acknowledge those nations with our respect and our gratitude. So we do have an agenda. Is there any additions from any directors? Thank you, Dr. Roth. We'll try and be quick. Gonna have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Roth, second by Director Jack. All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. We have minutes from the Board of Directors meeting held on March the 8th, 2023. Could we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Motion by Director Roth, second by Director Jack. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No petitions, no correspondence for action. Correspondence for information from Island Health. News release from Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. News release on Caring Connection. And a news release on Resilience and Safety Grant. Does anybody want to speak on any of the correspondence?
Move to receive.
And I'm second by Dr. Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We have the Alberni Creek Park Regional Hospital District financial statements. Sarah, did you want to speak on these?
Yeah, the financial statements are presented for adoption today. They were also audited by KPMG and their audit finding letter is part of the package. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions?
I'll move that we approve the audited financial statements for the Alberni-Clydewood Regional Hospital District as presented by 2022.
Second by Director Ross. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Reports. Banfield Health Center, Director Becca.
Thank you. No report, Madam Chair.
Alberni Quequot Community Care Society, Director Sika.
Thank you. I attended the orientation and the first board meeting. I found it a really healthy group and they're doing good work. They are, in order to improve retention of staff, they are providing 10 seats to upgrade from the care aid to the LPN level of care, which I thought was very forward thinking. They're looking to continue raising funding for the bus, and the other thing that they are continuing to do is they're retaining their masked readers to support infection control for their people that are living. So good meetings, and thank you.
Chipino General Hospital, Director Steer.
No report.
Thank you. Alberni Quequot Health Network, Director Cote.
Thank you. The report is attached from the last meeting. I did attend the BC Housing Summit. There will be a report coming from that as well that I'll send out. And I believe that the Breathe and Weave report was sent out to directors. Thank you. Next meeting is next week. The Health Network.
Thank you, Director.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. At ABICC, the health networks are actually going to do a presentation session at one of our plenary sessions, and they will have a free table also. So if you want any information, please visit the table. Thanks.
Thank you. West Coast General Hospital. At the last month's report, they had just opened for patients that day at the newly renovated ER. So as anytime we have a new area, there's little bugs they're working out, moving a few things around, and just still finishing up those odds and ends things in construction. And I did send out a request for either a tour or ask if there was going to be any kind of grand opening that we could attend. For those who are interested, I haven't heard back yet. As soon as I do, I will pass on the information. Any other reports? Could I get a motion to accept or receive the reports from A to G? Oh,
It's okay. I didn't have a thing.
Dr. Jackson, agree.
West Coast Native Healthcare Society, I didn't report, and there is no report.
Oh,
it's okay.
Can I get a motion to receive the reports?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No unfinished business, no late business. Any questions?
Madam Chair, there is one attendee. If they had any questions, that would be the time to enter into the Q&A.
So seeing no questions, could I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Director Roth, seconded by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
All right, welcome back. We'll have to move to go in camera. So I'll move that we close the meeting to the public as per the community charter under sections 91F, law enforcement, if the board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. 2, 91I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And 92B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to the negotiations between the regional district and the provincial government or the federal government or both, or between the provincial government or federal government or both and a third party. And so moved. Thank you, Dr. Ross. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Please refer to your in-camera agenda.